All right, very nice, very nice. So, welcome everyone. My
Hey
name
everyone.
is Matthias, and I'm here together with Mr. Emty, who brought to you this beautiful product from the Ground Up PLO5. Welcome to the stream.
Thanks for introduction, Matthias. Glad to be here and to present the course and yeah, to talk about 5 Card PLO.
Very nice. So, yeah, in case you don't know, I'm the creator of Vision from Run It Once, which is a software that helps you learn PLO, both 4 card and 5 card. So, we will very quickly go through this quiz that was prepared by Run It Once and talk a little bit about the spots that we find here. You also should have gotten an email that included this quiz. So yeah, let's go real quick together through this and take a look at the solutions. Maybe I should use a fresh browser.
Not spoil any solutions.
Exactly. Let's try it like this. Hold on a second. There we go. Does this work now? Yeah, looks good. Okay, so the first situation we have here is under the gun with king check 7-5 double suited. So the optimal pre-flop action. What would have been your initial guess?
Yeah, I think speaking maybe also for the audience, when you look at this hand for the first time, I think everyone will play this hand. Maybe also if you think a bit like a 4 card game, if you would have like King, Jack 5 double suited or King, Jack 7 single suited, I think also everyone would open it. And I think this hand is really close. Yeah, so kind of close between folding and raising. So yeah,
Exactly.
kind of hard to decide.
For me, it would have been a quite snap call raise. So I went for raise. So we get the feedback that it is a minus EV open from early position. And if you're looking it up, it's very, very close. So it's a very, very borderline thing. And it depends heavily on the rake environment where you're playing. So if you're playing higher stakes, then it is a close open raise. If you play on higher rake environments, like GG Poker, you should still fold this hand. So it's very important to realize that this is actually a close hand.
And maybe also some people in our audience, they're not playing, very high stakes or mid stakes where players are playing somewhat close to GTO. So what do you think about the effect, when we have a lot of loose players behind us, like recreationals?
Yeah.
Would you prefer then to get more involved with this hand or rather be tighter in this
I
spot?
think it still generally depends on the rake environment because at one hand you could argue that multi-way spots that you can steal a blinds less often than in a GTO environment, so this is losing value in this case. But then again, kings are still a decent multi-way hand, but very careful in PLO5 card. King high flushes are way more vulnerable, especially multi-way. So still be very careful. Yes, you will have a post-flop edge, but it's gonna be a very close open race nevertheless.
Yeah, I do agree.
Cool. So let's step to the next hand. Check the 9-5-5 double suited. So here my first idea was also to raise. And again, it turns out to be a very, very close open race. But would you also have guessed this is a race at first?
Yeah, I think in GTO I can kind of understand why it's a fold when the blinds are playing perfectly. But I think again it's interesting to think like how does the pool play in the blinds, right? I would say that the average player is slightly overfolding the blinds and not free betting as aggressively as they should,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of incentivizes me to maybe raise more often here than what the solver likes to. And also, when we talk about double suits, I think what becomes really important in five card is suit awareness, right? So we not just to define a hand as being double suited and just go for it, but also to look at the rank of our suits and how the suits are connected. So for example, in our hand, we can see that the Jack and the 10 suit are the same, and then our other suit is only the 9 high suit.
Yeah.
Whereas if we would have had, the Jack of Hearts, the 10 of Diamonds, the 9 of Hearts, and the 5 of Diamonds, I think it becomes a better hand to play. And sometimes these, slight suit differences can definitely make a difference in these spots.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the edge and fun also from five card comes from these little small differences that you can suddenly spot. Like the first thing, if I look at this hand, is caution. We have pocket fives. We don't really want to hit 5. Like if I hit a 5 here, then I'm already like, yeah, okay, I'm most likely not good at the river. It's gonna be a bluff catcher eventually. So be careful. 5's very bad. 9 high flush draw, as you already mentioned, pretty bad. Jack high also not as ideal. But I also see Jack 10-9, which still is a very nice hand. And this makes it, again, a very close spot. And fold is, even from the button, a fold. Again, low rake environments, you can make arguments for open raise this hand, but just be aware that this is a trouble hand.
Yeah, and I think the sixes would already be an open. So Jack 10-9, 6-6 with the same suits. So because we just have the improved connectivity with the 9 and the sixes, which definitely makes a difference in that spot.
Okay, next hand, Ace 8, 7, 5, single suited. It's your turn.
Yeah, let me take the first guess. So I think this hand, like pretty much any ace high suit hand with a pocket pair, is a very high frequency open on the button. There are probably some candidates that we definitely don't want to open, like the very low pairs and very disconnected versions or trip suit versions, but this one ticks a lot of boxes. We have the nut suit with only 2 suits and not trip suits. And we have a middling pair with connected side cards. So I think this is just a pretty high EV open in this spot.
Yeah, and this might sound a little bit weird to some people because now we have way more gaps. We only are single suited. Before we were double suited, and still this is a better hand than the Jack 10-9, 5-5, and this is indeed a clear open raise. So yeah, ace high suits is very important in 5 cards because this is pretty much the only hand where you can easily go for 3 barrels in case you're hitting your hand. Even with the king high flush in 5 card, it's oftentimes not as chill.
Yeah, and if we again talk about like micro stakes, low stakes, where your opponents will have very high VP/IP frequencies, the chance for multiple pots is super high, and therefore also the chance to run with a second nut flush into the nut flush becomes much higher when there are way more players involved.
Totally right. Next hand, King 8, deuce from the cutoff. Kings oftentimes overplayed in 5 card. It is a single suited hand. So also not the best. We have 8 and deuces with a very low connectivity. And deuces, we already said before with the 5s, we don't really like to hit our sets and can go for 3 streets of value. So in my opinion, this can go to the fold here.
Yeah, I think I do agree. We actually don't have any connectivity at all. Like there's no way to make a straight with our hands. And indeed, the second pair with the deuces has very low nut potential. So something like, I think, King 8, 5-5, King 8, 6-6 would be a very clear open. This hand from the button, I do think would also be an open. But the lessons learned from players, transitioning from no limit hold'em to 4 cards, maybe some of the viewers here as well, is that the Broadway pairs just don't have anywhere nearly as good value in 4 card in 4 card PLO as they do in no limit hold'em, and that learning actually is even more true in 5 card, where these Broadway pairs lose even more in value than they already do in 4 card.
Very well said. Let's see if we are right. Yes, we are right. I think the explanation we already did in detail. Okay, next hand. Squeeze situation. Middle position opens, card of calls. We have ace, ace, queen, 9, 8. So is this now a hand that we are going to call in 5 card?
Maybe I think the question is already interesting for some of the viewers, because they might see aces and they might just say, you know, why would I ever do something else than squeeze if I do have aces? Which I think is very true in No Limit Hold'em, and maybe also in most of the 4 card spots. But in 5 card becomes another deal, and I think we'll also talk about it in greater deal, in greater detail later. That we really need to pay attention which aces we want to be aggressive with in different scenarios. If we look at the hand here, we have a nut suit where we don't have the trip suit. We are nicely connected with all our cards. We are also kind of in a middling high section of the board of the hand ranking, and therefore I think it's a very clear squeeze. Yeah.
Very nice. I think so too. So my rule of thumbs is a little bit, if we have a suited ace, if it's double suited, it's mostly gonna be a squeeze. If it's single suited, I want connectivity, and if we don't have an ace-high suit, it's mostly just gonna be a call. So I think this is an easy way to kind of think about these aces in 5 card. But yeah, here we have single suited and connectivity, so that's...
And maybe if we can go one step also here, like, you know, to distinguish between in position and out of position. I think it's also interesting that probably in position we can squeeze a bit more, because we just have the in position scenario post flop if one or more opponents call. Whereas out of position, also with the reduced fold equity, we probably want to be even more careful with which aces we want to squeeze.
Okay, next hand. What do we have? You're in the big blind and face a raise from the button. You decide to defend your big blind, and the flop comes 8-6-5, rainbow. You know this board favors your range and decide to add in leads to your flop strategy. So what are good hands to go with a lead? Is it top pair kind of hands? Is it strong overpairs like aces? Is it a hand with good blockers like a 7? In this case, should be the best blocker, or is it a set or better? So a good value hand.
Yeah, I think multiple answers might be correct here, although the question is phrased as with the most often, and therefore I'll probably say C, having the good blockers, but I can also see D being a good answer, because some strong sets with backup, like a straight draw or a gut shot.
I just want to say, I was actually thinking the same when I saw this question, and yeah, exactly as you say, even if we have a set, we still want to have like something on top, like as you said, maybe a gut shot, and then we have pretty much blockers again. So yeah, the set itself is mostly not going to be enough. So blockers is definitely what we are looking out for our leading range. So yeah, that's also
and
correct.
A and B, I think we can just fully exclude.
Yeah, totally.
The over pairs and the top pair, no blockers. Yeah.
Totally. So, we open raise early position and decide to 4-bet after we face the button 3-bet. Flop comes low, 7th reduce offsuit, what should be our default action. So this is now not a specific hand, but a range play. So should we go for a check call here, bet pot, bet small, or check fold with our overall range? So I think this is a quite intuitive and easy one. Maybe not like everyone who plays 4 cards will see this, that a disconnected rainbow board is perfect for our 4-betting range, because it's just very high pair heavy, and it's gonna be hard for anyone or for any hand to beat the equity of an overpair, even in 5 card. So yeah, bet pot should be our standard play here. SPR is very low.
And with the positions, I mean, it's under the gun 4-bet against button 3-bet. I think our range is probably 90 to 95% aces in the spot. And if we also consider that the button did free bet us, like the free bet range usually doesn't interact with 7-3 deuce rainbow at all.
Yeah.
So we have a super clear, yeah, I would even call it a polarity advantage because the aces are just really outperforming our opponent's range. And yeah, some boards might be different, you know, if it comes like king, queen, 8 rainbow or something like that, the range interaction will be different.
Yeah, we're gonna take a look at 4-bet spots in general a little bit later. So for
Mhm.
now, last question I think is gonna be here, middle position, facing 3-bet. What are our 4-bet hands? Is it any aces? Is it double suited ace high hands with very good connectivity? Single suited hands with strong pairs like single suited kings, or is it any suited hand with high cards? Like, yeah, king, jack, 10, 9, 7. Yeah, for me, again, quite intuitive, but definitely a little bit tricky if we compare now 4 card to 5 card. Because in 4 card, we usually would say A for the most part is pretty much a snap 4-bet. But yeah, we already mentioned it before a little bit when it came to squeezing. We needed to be very careful with aces and 5 card, and therefore answer A is not correct. And we go with
Yeah, B, I think the preferred choice. Blocking aces and still having really good equity against the free bet hands all other than aces.
Exactly. Double suited heads up is pretty nice because we have 2 flush draws always. And yeah, as we said before, the ace with medium side cards and the medium pair, ace 8, 8, 7, 5, I think it was the hand, is already very good when it comes to raise first in. And also here you mentioned the reasons for why it's a good 4-bet, and that's why we agree, I guess, to go with B.
Yeah,
and that is
it.
correct. Okay, so that's it for the quiz. And I would say let's go to Vision, the Vision stream. So correct me if I'm wrong, but everyone who bought your course or buys your course gets a month free of Vision. Am I correct with this?
Yeah, that's a promotion that is still active until the end of February. So for another 8 days. So yeah, I think it's worth it to pick that deal to get that 1 month of Vision for free, basically.
Yeah, so we will talk here mostly about Vision and show you how to practice with it, how to study, how to use it, what are the features. And first off, I still would like to talk with you a little bit about why switch from 4 card to 5 card? Why not just play 4 card? Or why did you switch from 4 card to 5 card? Why do you think 5 card is a very interesting game?
Yeah, it has shown in the last months and maybe even 1 or 2 years that there's just a lot of action. And when I started looking at the tables, I saw that the tables were really good in terms of like high VP/IP players and players going with a really high percentage to the flop. So everyone is like wanting to see flop of all kind of hands, which was kind of the thing maybe that happened in PLO 4 card, you know, like 5-6 years ago, when it also started to gain a lot of popularity. And there's just a lot of action. I think you just feel like that you flop a lot of hands, like at least 2 pairs or some kind of pair with a draw. And I just think that for the recreational player, it's like really attractive to play a kind of game format where they feel like that they can make a lot of hands, which not necessarily maybe have to be nutted or extreme good hands, but they just feel like they flop a lot of things and there's a lot of things going on. And therefore, it's a game that's very attractive for recreationals, but also I think for aspiring professional players to study and to really discover where the edges lie in the game. And I hope we will also we will definitely go into greater detail on the edges that can be created today as well.
Very nice. So yeah, I myself am also a 5-card and 6-card player even. So the more cards, the better. And for me, the main reason is that I really like to think about all types of components that a hand has. Like if I only have 2 cards, I know, okay, yeah, I mean, there's only so much that I can have. Like I can have a top pair with a kicker. And that's pretty much all the top pair hands that I can have. Yes, I can have one different suit. But now if we go to PLO, I can have like backdoor flush draws. I can, with frontal flush draws, with frontal blockers, with high blockers, with low blockers. I can have reps. So yeah, there's just way more to think about. And therefore, I never liked this randomization aspect of No Limit Hold'em, that at one point you just have to randomize because you can't think out a spot more. And the more cards you add, the more stuff you have to think about. Like if you have 5 cards, then you have 1 card more to think about. And also the margin of error is way higher, like when it comes to both pre-flop and post-flop. Pre-flop is very easy in comparison to recognize if you're playing No Limit Hold'em, and also gets more and more perfected if you are playing 4 cards PLO. But whenever you open a table in 5-card PLO, like there are so many mistakes that players make. And it's also not very easy to spot because some things are not as intuitive as they might seem. And we saw it in the quiz a little bit already, but I hope we can also show you throughout the stream why that is the case.
Yeah, very well put.
Okay, so when you are opening starting Vision from scratch, then you are seeing this window here. And as we are talking about 5-card, we can go here to 5-card. And the first thing, like, how would I recommend you to start with learning 5-card from scratch using Vision is always to start with pre-flop. So the way I like to learn pre-flop, and I like to start from scratch, like raise first in, I think is the most important spot. Like so much value is gained or lost in pre-flop racing first in and pre-flop play in general. Like I have spent hundreds of hours in solvers and know exactly like how big of an AV cost pre-flop missed decisions can cost you. So I would go to Streak and start out here. So Streak is the interactive mode in Vision. So you can compete with other players. Month by month, we have leaderboards where you can compare your success or for example, here we can see race first in under the gun, top 5. We have the number 1 having 142 correct answers in a row. So props to Mr. T. Napoleao. Very nice performance. We, by the way, also have a weekly challenge that is gonna switch between 4-card and 5-card every week. And if you are ranking first in this, you are getting a free month of Vision as well. But that's just being said on the side. So yeah, if you're starting fresh, I would just go here and start with under the gun race first in. So you can see you get a hand generated randomly. And yeah, this is going to be a fold. Also, I think actually an interesting one to start with, as it's a double suited double pair hand, which in 4-card I think is already pretty nutty, right?
Yeah, I agree. Like double pairs and 4 cards are being played a lot when we talk about race first in. I think there's some exceptions in the like earlier positions when we have a rainbow or just a single suited low disconnected double pair, like 5-5 deuce deuce or 7-7 deuce deuce. But this might again look very tempting for the novice player in 5-card double pair, double suited, as you mentioned, Matthias. So yeah, but I think the fold is very correct. And especially like earlier we talked about playing in the pool where players will VPIP more often behind us, which means we go more often multi-way, then I think such a hand will start suffering a lot because none of our suits are live and also our sets will be very unnutted.
Yeah, so here to explain the right-hand visualization of vision, you can see here the various categories that you can have with 8/8 free deuce. So we can have it single suited, we can have it with 3 suits, we can have it double suited, or we can have it, yeah, some call it double suited pure, and this is just double suited. There is no official terminology as far as I'm aware, but yeah, you can see pretty much here. These are placeholder suits, so don't get confused that these are here clubs, or there are hearts and clubs. It's just a placeholder for being double suited. And here we can see this is, no matter how well it's suited, it's always going to be a fold. So now the hard question I will ask you: what's the first hand, the first double pair instead of of threes that you would open raise, like 8/8 deuce with which other pair on top? Sorry for the question. This can be a hard one.
I would say only aces.
Only aces. Interesting.
Yeah.
And
so we can go for the second best guess, which would be kings, right?
Yeah, I would say I agree. Yep. And so yeah, nothing changes if we enter kings. And if we enter aces, suddenly every version of this hand. So this emphasizes how important or how big the difference between like having aces and kings is already. Because every ace is an open raise, even if we are not having a suited ace. This is better than having double suited king, 8/8 deuce. So I think very nice value here.
Another intuitive double pair would maybe be something like 8/8/7/7 deuce or 8/8/9/9 deuce. People might think about the connectivity, but also I think these
could sound better than even kings, but it's not an open raise. So then if we go from here, 8/8/7/7, which fifth card do you think is good enough? Like, is the 6 here good enough, or is it exclusively an ace? What do you think? I
would go for the 9 maybe.
Yeah, I would be confident about the 9. I'm not confident about the 6, but let's see. Wow. Okay, so I input the 7. Sorry. So if we go with the 9 here, yep, we are correct here, and the 6 could be good enough because there is no gap. We can talk about this later as well. Yes, so the 6 is also good enough, and the 5 is the one gap already. Okay, this is also good enough, and then the 4. We start here folding. Okay, so I think
also have the 3 stripes on the top right, which I just want to throw in, like the 2 times where I think it once shows you the frequency and numbers, because right now we can only see the colors.
Exactly.
And the other one also, I think, shows you which proportions of these suits make up of your hand, right? So if we type
exactly. So if we have 8/8/7/7/4, we will have it 41.7% in this category. So this is the category we have the most often, and this is the category we have the least often with only 8.3%. So yeah, thanks for pointing this out. So we more often have a double suited version than a single suited version, but this also makes sense because it's a double pair. So there are less permutations, I think. So yeah.
So a lot of players like come into 5 card might think, oh, I have a double suited hand and feel like it's something special. But we can already see in this example, like the 8/8/7/7/4, that double suited combinations are represented by 50% of the hands of 8/8/7/7/4. So having a double suited hand is not necessarily something that makes our hand special, like it might be more often the case in 4 cards.
Yeah, so if you have double suited as an open raiser, then the tighter defending range will most likely have more double suited hands than you. So keep that in mind when thinking about the ranks, the rank of your suits. Like with the pocket 8s, you will have very low suits. So yeah, keep that in mind. Yeah, let's continue. I think this was already a nice one to start with. So the next one is going to be Ace King, totally premium hand. I think no one is going to play it any different. And whenever something is clear, I still want to think about like what category is the border category. And we can see here everything that's double suited is fine. Single suited is fine to the ace, but as soon as we don't have a single suited ace, even ace, king, queen, jack, 4 is gonna be a fold most of the time. So the king high suit here we can see is still okay. Here it gets close because we have the king and the queen, so we can dominate less post flop. And yeah, also, and I think a nice hand to demonstrate the thin borders of how to think about pre-flop in 5 card.
Yeah, I think in general, having this mindset of finding the thresholds pre-flop is super important for new players. Trying to figure out for the various positions, for the hand categories, where the thresholds are. And it's a lot of practice and a lot of repetition, but over time you will start feeling more and more confident. And I think for this purpose, also something like Skreek or the practice mode is just super nice to identify basically the thresholds as you just did.
Yeah, okay, so now we had a double pair hand. We had a ace Broadway hand. Let's see what we get next. Okay, another ace Broadway hand. We just learned that if the ace is off-suited, it's still good enough if we are double-suited. So that's already comes in handy here. High pairs, single-suited, close. And I did it wrong.
Fold. Yeah.
So we can see we always open raise queen, queen, jack, jack, deuce. So mistake. Good to know.
We actually have the worst suit variation, I think.
Yeah, even the worst suit here gonna be a fold, a raise. So I still, as we said, always look at the thresholds. And here, as we open raise everything, we could just change the jacks to 10s, and then we see, okay, our hand that we have here is 100% fold. So I take the blame, but it's still not too bad.
Yeah, and there's also this addition, right, where it says my hand, which basically represents your suit variation with other side cards. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, that's good to know.
So yeah, this is now the suit combination that we had here. Okay, so that's how I would start out using Vision. Climb up here this whole preflop RFI ladder, and once you're done and you want to do something else because you are you did a lot of studying preflop, I think we can already go to postflop. I wouldn't mind or bother to go through all these categories and then go to flop from here, because I don't think that you will be ready to go to the Skreek spots post-flop, because post-flop is, pretty hard again to learn. And I think there's a better way to start out learning post-flop. And this is what I'm going to show you now.
Maybe you can also talk quickly about the different levels of Skreek, because I think there's like a bronze and silver and gold for the completion of certain
Exactly.
categories.
So we have here 3. So our highest streak is 3 at the moment. So this you can see here the red border is filling up. Once you get to 5, you are getting a bronze border. When you're getting to 10, you get a silver one, and if you are getting to 20, you get a golden one. So yeah, very good way to think about it in preflop. Preflop, I think, is to get the golden one for pretty much all the spots. And then once you got this, you can move to post flop for the first time, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach.
Okay, so we have post flop here. Learn mode, I like to start out post flop. And then you can see there's already a lot of options that we have. We can switch between 50, 100, 200 BB, single raise, 3-bit, 4-bit pots, single rainbow boards, and then for every of these categories, we have a lot of positions and spots, so where to start with. And this is where I can recommend you looking at the Vision Discord, and especially this file in the update section, because there is an overview of all the spots in Vision and sorted by their importance and how much study time you should spend on these various spots. So this is calculated by how often they actually happen in game. So the most frequent spots happening is 1BB single spot button versus big blind. So this should be your center of attention pretty much all the time, I would say. Like this is a spot that comes up very often. So second one is 3-bet pot 1BB button versus small blind. It's only happening 7.28%, but it's still higher ranked than the 1BB single pot small versus big blind that comes up 22% of the time. And the reason for this is because if we are playing 3-bet pots, the pot size is bigger, so the mistake is going to be more costly that you potentially make. And that's why this spot is more important to study than 1BB single raise pot small versus big blind. So my suggestion for now is to start with the most frequent spot and then check out what stands out and what is important. So I'm going to open this one up, 100BB single raise pot button versus big blind, and then I just pick a random unpaired board. So also keep in mind unpaired boards are the most frequent. I think it's like 55,
close to 70%, I think.
close to
even.
7. Yeah, yeah, true.
Yeah.
Close to 70%, true. Then we have paired and straight with like 15% each, and then we have monotone boards with 5% each. So also focus your study on mainly unpaired boards, and yeah, don't focus too much on monotone boards. But also Vision is doing this for you, like in the streak mode, you will get proportionally the type of spots that you are getting in game. So you will not get, you will only get 5% of monotone boards. Okay, so opening up this board, we can see here that big blind is the first one to act post flop, and big blind should lead out 18% of the time on queen 9 deuce single suited. So you could now open up every spot and compare these values, but we also have this overview feature. And here you can see that on average, over all these 223 boards that we have, you should lead out 16%. So this immediately tells us, okay, queen 9 deuce is a board that we are leading more than average. So it's so why are we leading in general? Like what is the idea? Like why are we leading some boards more or some boards less?
Yeah, it usually has to do with I think range versus range interaction. So our defense range in the big blind is of course very different than the opening range from the button. First of all, it's a tighter range, but we missed the very strong hands because we didn't free bet. And so naturally, certain boards are more in favor for us than for the button. And I think you already presented this really nice overview function because here the boards are sorted from the highest leading frequency to the lowest. And maybe you can also activate the numbers so we can see the frequencies for each flop, like how often do we lead. And yeah, maybe before we already give the answer to the viewers can think themselves what they see, like what do these boards have in common that are led the most. I think I can see here 29%. That's a quite significant leading frequency. But why is it these boards and what do they have in common? Maybe, Matthias, before you give your answer on this, we can give the audience 10 seconds to think about it, or maybe to write something into the chat what their thoughts are. So, yeah.
Sure. And once we figured out what or why, like what do these boards have in common, we immediately know that our range in the big blind contains a lot of these cards in our defending range and more than the button player has, as you also already mentioned. Okay, so I don't have the chat open, so is there anything?
I don't think so. So I guess the chat is very curious about your answer.
Okay, so yeah, we definitely see at first that all of these boards are rainbow, so we don't have any single suited board, which automatically tells us that if we are only calling pre-flop in the big blind, even though the button has like a 45% something open raising range, our big blind defending range still has less flushed or suited and double suited hands than the in position open range, simply because we didn't free bet. So a lot of our range is already discounted to being single suited and less double suited. And the same goes for the high card. We don't see a single ace here. We don't see a king here. Even if we scroll down, there is no. The first one is king 8-7, but this is again not because of the king, but because of the 8-7, 7-5. And if you take a look at the best boards here, we again see 8-7, 8-6, 7-6, 7-5. So middleish cards, not too low though. Again, here we have a deuce, but again it's 7-6. So it's not the super low boards, because in the big blind we are still folding a lot against the open raise from the button. So the middling cards is what we hit the best in the big blind, and therefore this is the majority part of our leading range.
Yeah, very well put. Aside from having less double suited hands, I think we also have way less nut suited hands, due to the fact that we didn't free bet pre-flop, and the button of course opens, like we saw earlier in the quiz, the ace 8, 8-7-5 with the nut suit, but also a lot of other nut suited hands, as well as all the aces that contain a nut suit. So there's also quite the disadvantage when it comes to having nut suited hands on suited boards.
Oh yeah. So what did we learn now immediately without having to look at any hands manually? We learned that rainbow boards with middleish cards are very good for us to lead. So these are the boards, if we are encountering them in game, we should think about, okay, do I have the right components here to make a lead? In comparison, if we would filter this for ace high, then our leading range drops to 6%, pretty much irrelevant. But look at this, we again have 8-7, 7-5, and again, mostly rainbow.
Yep.
So yeah, this is pretty much a quick introduction to leading here from the big blind. And next, let's take a look at the c-bet range and how this is structured. Like, what are the best boards here if we are now the button player, and what can we spot here? I think this is also very clear. If we scroll down, we always see the ace being the highest card here. Also, all these boards with ace high are better than the first one without an ace. That is check 10-4 is the best board that we can have without an ace. And then again, we go to 9-3 deuce, 7-3 deuce, 7-4 deuce. So we had this in the quiz before already when it came to strong ranges, high pair heavy ranges, that these boards are pretty good for us. So that again comes into play here, because all the high pairs, like at the most aces, are still in our range, are in our range from the button, but not from the big blind. And as we said, these low cards are folds pre-flop, so this is not favoring the button range as well.
Yeah, I would still say, because the button range is definitely somewhat wider than the big blind's range, that when it comes to that very low card connectivity, like the 4-5-6, 3-4-5 combos, that button also has still more of these than the big blind. So yes, there's definitely the aces advantage and the big overpair advantage, but also the very low cards, they connect quite nicely with, or let's say much better with the button opening range than with the big blind defense range.
Exactly. So once we remove the ace here, oh, that's not removing. Here, if we can expand this and remove the ace, yeah, then we can see the boards that are good for us now. So it's more important that there are low cards than the suitedness that we had before. So as we are in 5 cards, we saw that a lot of our hands are going to be double suited anyway. So hold on, I removed your camera. So yeah, this is pretty much the main takeaway that we have here, looking through the overview of single race pots pretty quickly. So high cards, disconnected boards, very good for the open racer. Middleish cards, very good for the defender. Be the first takeaway here.
And if we look at the boards that we see bet with the lowest frequency, then they should kind of be a bit in line probably with the boards that big blind is leading the most, right? To kind of put the pieces together. So maybe we can have a look at the boards that we're c-betting at the lowest frequency.
Okay, so we can see low frequency c-bets are also king high boards, either hit or miss. I think a lot of the kings, as we saw, are not free bets in 5 card. So yeah, all the kings still in the calling range of out of position, but king top set is not a big part of your range, so that you can start out leading these boards heavily. So yeah, that's why we see a lot of the king X here, and then yeah, we can see also the more middleish cards here that we are not c-betting as much, but also a lot of these king high boards still. So king high, also queens, of course, is the same region. If we have the majority or the bigger part of aces, then yeah, we don't really value bet these king high, queen high boards too much. So that's also a reason for this here. So the next thing I would like to do is looking at the free bet pot and then move on from the overviews, if that's fine for you.
Yeah, sounds good.
So the highest value free bet pot, the most occurring free bet pot was small versus button, and again we can go with the unpaired boards, and yeah, now the small one is the preflop aggressor, small blind 3-bets, button calls, and we have a random flop. Again, looking at the overviews, we want to see like what are the best boards for us here if we are 3-betting, and this is, I think, again very clear to figure out a pattern here.
Ace high boards definitely very great for us. We can see we also have 2 different sizings here, so we can, starting with 100 big blind stacks, we can go for half pots or full pots.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, as the free better, aces make up a lot of our range. We can maybe in a second look at the hand filter and see how often do we have aces on this board as the free better in these positions.
Yeah, I just want yeah, go ahead.
And something interesting to see as well with the ace high boards is that, for example, the very dry ace high boards that are really connected as well, we more often go for half pot because there's not too much need for protection, let's say, from straight draws and things like that. And we can also see a very interesting observation, and that is the ace high suit on the board, or is the ace high suit the offsuit card on the board? Because if the ace is offsuit, then it also means we will have more top sets with nut flush draws, because we will hold 2 aces and like 2 out of 3 aces that are still left, like in our hand, and the one last ace in the deck. So there's a like decent chance that we have an ace of hearts in our hands, and a very decent chance as well that we have a second heart in our hands. And therefore, the disconnected ace high boards where the ace rainbow card is on board is actually a very strong board for us, and therefore we can also size a bit down. Whereas if the ace high suit is on the board, then we want to size more often bigger because there's more need for protection, because the backup for us won't be as strong with the lack of flush draws.
Perfect. That's exactly what I also wanted to mention. And while we are at ace high boards, I think they are just generally quite nice, but we can see only 4% of them we are checking, and this is pretty much the same thing we saw in the single race pots already, these side cards here. So all these boards that have some straights, some lowish straight connecting side cards, we are even starting to check at times. But yeah, only 4%, and this is gonna be the highest betting card. If we would change that to a king, we immediately see that a king high board is getting checked 46% of the time. So from 4 to 46% is just showing that it's just a huge difference for our strategy. So I'm gonna exclude the ace here. And now we see all the boards that are not ace high. Maybe we can first emphasize your point that you made before. Also, yeah, with these more connected side cards, we are also going for more pot size bets. Because all these Broadway hands, if we have aces, then the free bet caller has a lot of these Broadway connected hands that we also need a lot of protection against. So yeah, these middle-ish to high connected side cards, also we prefer to potting more. And then if we would filter for the smaller sizes, we see it's gonna be these offsuited ace high boards, as you mentioned, that we are mostly going for a smaller sizing. Okay, and one last step. Let's remove the ace and let's do it. Let's exclude the ace. And then we see the boards from the quiz, like 7-3 deuce was a board from the quiz. I think it was even a 4-bet pot, so it's in the 4-bet pots even more emphasized than it is in the 3-bet pots as the preflop aggressor, but also in the 3-bet pots already 70%, and pot is our preferred play here. So all these similar boards we are seeing here, rainbow disconnected. Again here, so these are the boards that we are preferring to pot more. And there are more like all the other patterns are not that clear anymore. And when we will come to comparing 4-card to 5-card, I think this is going to be emphasized even more. The differences here in situations like this. Anything you want to add before looking at the button real quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to on the very top right to the situation instead of the overview. So maybe some of the viewers might be asking what fraction of our range is aces.
Yeah, correct.
In these positions, because we're small blind versus button, and we have quite an aggressive free bet strategy, free betting around 10% of hands. So out of that 10% that we get to the flop with, how many of these hands are aces? And we can see that aces are actually quite a substantial part of our range, like close to 40%, which is definitely quite a lot. And therefore, especially on these like more dynamic boards, we need to, when we go with the study a bit deeper, we need to figure out what the thresholds are and also what the heuristics are for c-betting, because we cannot just c-bet and stack off all our aces here. We have to be careful with the backup we have, with the side cards, especially when the board is like this, like connected and suited. Yeah, on the 9-3 deuce rainbow, we can just probably get away just by potting always. But on this board, we definitely have to be quite selective.
Yeah, I think this is a very nice entry point for the next topic when we want to compare a little bit of 4-card to 5-card. So I will leave this open for now. And the next thing I wanted to shortly address is how we are using Vision to study. And I use Vision pretty much every time for my warm-up routine. So how do I like to use Vision as a warm-up? As we already talked, under the gun, or not under the gun, raise first in general is a very, very important spot. So this is what I want to practice every time, but I don't have the time to go through all these positions in streak before my sessions, because then I would have like 1 hour warm-ups every time. But instead, I like to go with the RFI trainer. You can find it if you go to practice and then check the RFI trainer. And I set the difficulty to normal for now. There is the rake structure that you can choose. So if you hover over it, you will see the rake percentage and the cap. I think you don't see it on stream because of the stream capture. But yeah, for example, PLO 400 to 600 is what we are using for post-flop. And then you can also check the stack sizes that you want to learn. And this is now a quick way to get started for your session, because now I set the difficulty to normal, so we can now decide from which position under the gun, MP, cutoff, or button this hand that we get here is an open race. So this is always very nice for me to calibrate a little bit my preflop ranges when I'm still rusty. So for this hand, I would say this is not an open race from any position. We have 3 of a suit disconnected. So I just go with OK. And we see this is correct. And then the next hand with ace, queen, 10, 8, 3. A similar hand that we already had under the gun, where we said that we need a king high suit, double suited, to open raise this. And so this is definitely not an open raise from under the gun. And yeah, in 5 card, you won't be able to remember every hand. So for me, it's mostly good enough if I get the threshold right. So for example, if I would think this is an open raise from only the button, but in reality, it's an open raise from middle position as well, then I would say, okay, I definitely am rusty or should study a little bit more preflop. But if it's only open raise from cutoff and button, then I would say, okay, that's good enough for now for me. So yeah, ace, queen, 10, 8, 3. I would say cutoff and button would be my threshold to open raise this hand. What do you think?
Yeah, I think same for me. If it would be the queen high suit, I would certainly feel confident to open from the cutoff. Like this, it's close, but yeah, I would go for the same choice as you.
Okay, and we can see it's only from the button. So yeah, this is acceptable for me. Let's say it like this. But you can see this is a very hard mode. Like if you would go for streak and practice under the gun as we did before, it's just snap fold and move on. But now you have to think about all the positions. If we would set the difficulty to hard, we would add the small blinds raise first in without a limp as well. And if we go to insane, we would add the small blinds with limping and the big blind versus a limp as well. So it gets harder and harder. The deeper you want to go. Ace, king, 10, 7 deuce. I think learning from the hand before. I only want to raise this from the button. 10, 10, 8, 5, 5. Double suited. Interesting hand, as we had a similar one at the start of the stream. What would be your thought about this hand now?
I think it's pretty close between cutoff and button. I would definitely not open this from early position or MP. It's just a bit too disconnected, although it's double suited. But yeah, as you already can see in my response, and I think that's why it's such a great tool, the RFI trainer. It forces you to not just give a very isolated answer for one hand and one position, but you kind of have to think about the thresholds. And thresholds is often what it's about in our pre-flop game and also for our post-flop game. Find thresholds for certain actions, and that's why I think this tool makes you really sharp on your RFI strategy. So especially for players being new to 5-card PLO, I think this is just an amazing tool to get the practice and the reps in.
Yeah, and I think this is also the first thing you might want to do after you finish the streaks for all the single position, for all the isolated positions, and then see how far are you off. For example, like if you think this is an open race from under the gun, you most likely will be too far off an ideal pre-flop strategy. So yeah, emphasize race first in a little bit more. I think this is only an open race from the button, but I'm in the same boat as you. Cutoff could also be close, but it turns out that only from the button here is correct. Why? Because yes, we have 2 flush draws. We saw that this is not too spectacular, especially if it's only 10 high. And then we have 10s, not an amazing pocket pair to bet multiple streets for value. And the 5s are pretty much only backup equity, even if we hit a set, if we want to exaggerate a little here. Okay, yeah. So maybe if you don't have anything to add, let's do a couple more. Okay, another double pair. This time very weak though.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess it's an interesting one. I mean, intuitively now we can definitely say that it's not an open from the cutoff if 10-10-8-5-5 is not an open. But I think even this toggle pair is so weak that we should fold it even on the button. Yeah, something that might be super unintuitive for no limit or four card PLO players.
Yeah, definitely. I think very easy fold here from the button. Check 8-7-3-3. Is this something new that we didn't mention yet before? We had something like, what was it? Check 10-9-5-5, right? In the beginning of the quiz. And
Good
it
one.
turned out to be a fold from the button. So this is definitely weaker than the hand before. So we go for the fold from all positions here and see that it's correct. Interesting hand here, 9-8-7-6-3, rundown. 4-card players love them. 6-card players ignore them if they
Yeah,
had this.
I think the free is a big problem in the hands, and also the ranking of our cards. If it would be something like Jack 10, 9, 8, 5, then it would probably be a playable hand just in terms of the two pairs and the rank of straights that we make, or the backup that we have, or the rank of the suits. But this hand, even double suited, I think, would be a fold with the very disconnected free in our hands.
Yeah, so definitely snap fold with this hand, even with the double suited one. I would just snap fold it from every position. And correct here. Maybe we will see something more interesting. This also is quite weak. And this one is now interesting, I think. This has a lot of components that are interesting to value their strength. Okay, so can you maybe point out all things you think about once you see this hand?
Of course. So what we notice at first glance is that we are double suited, but that we also have a trip suit. So as I already mentioned, suit awareness is very important in PLO5 card, and we can, if we take a closer look, we can identify that the trip suit we have is with the ace high suit, which is definitely a bad thing because it will be harder to make nut flushes when having 3 of the suits in our hand compared to just having 2 of the suits. And yeah, we have a second suit, which is definitely a nice addition to our hand. There is some connectivity, but it's a very gapped connectivity. Yes, all our cards are kind of connected to each other, but it's extremely gappy. Like we have 2 gaps between the ace and jack, we have 3 gaps between the jack and the 7. So it's not an amazingly connected hand. I would definitely say for sure that this hand is an open from the button. I would say it gets somewhat close on the cutoff, but I would still include it. But I would certainly fold it in early position, and middle position would be kind of the tricky thing. But I would for now go for cutoff and button.
Okay, I think this is a very nice hand, so I want to spend a little more time on it. I want to open up a notepad for it. Okay, because I think there are like various levels to think about this hand. So I would call it level 0. Let's make it a little bit bigger. How can you zoom in? Okay, here we go. So level 0, I would say, if I ask the question that I just asked you, is someone tells me it's double suited, and that's it. Level 1, I would say, you see that it's triple double suited, or not pure double suited. I'm not sure how do you want to call this.
Yeah, I would usually also call it pure double suits. And I have the tendency to call something a double triple suited hand when the good suit is only the double suit. And I would call this hand a triple double suited hand because our strongest suit has the free suits. Like that's kind
Okay.
of my approach when taking notes.
Let's not overcomplicate it for now. So level 2, I would say that the ace is the bad suit. because it has free of a suit. Next one that I would see, like if you are better than that, I think you see that it's good that you don't have ace and jack suited. Jack is not suited to ace. I mean, that's good because then the second suit is also a jack high suit, so this is even higher. And I think that's mostly it, but I think there is still a level to think about. That 7-5 is also good if it would be suited. There is some value if you have the lower suit also connected with low side cards. But yeah, this is quite marginal, and in this case not really correct, as it's good that we have a higher suit as the second one. And what is very important or very interesting that I've been figuring out when working with Vision is that oftentimes it's better to have, okay, let's say, it's better to have ace 7 suited, jack 7-5 suited, than having like this. It can be good. It can be better to have 3 of a suit than having a hand like this. And this is mostly true if the 3 of the suits are low. And what do you think the reason of this is, that this one could be better than this one? And this tells us a lot about the 5-card game.
Yeah, the nuttiness of straight flush potentials, because the jack and the 7 are connected to make a straight flush, like 10-9-8, and then we also have the 7-5 connectivity to make straight flushes on like 6-4-3, 8-6-4, 9-8-6. Whereas with the jack 5, we don't have any of that potential.
What do you think if I say that even this is true? Oh no, that doesn't work like this. But okay, let's keep it the way we had it before. The main reason I figured out is that this is less often dominated because we have 3 of a suit. So if we have hit a flush here, it's less likely that our flush is going to be dominated, and it's more likely that we are the only one having a flush here. And the second thing is, this is a way better bluff catcher against like the ace of flush blocker than it would be with this hand. So if we have 3 of a suit, this is always a snap call against a free barrel on a flush board, and this is oftentimes going to be just ending up being a fold. So yeah, once you hit the flush more often, or you don't get dominated as likely, and second of all, you have a better bluff catcher against someone who represents the nut flush. So yeah, this is also an interesting thing that you might be able to figure out. And these are the small things where I also mentioned that I really like to think deep about the game. And this is, again, something that's mostly exclusive to 5-card, because you just face a lot of these scenarios where someone is representing the nuts and you have these type of hands.
To summarize, we're gonna make flushes less often with the trip suit combination, but when we do hit the flush, then we're less often dominated, basically.
Right? Yeah, exactly. You are more happy to hit a flush with this hand than with this hand, because this is a hero call that's oftentimes not good. That's a hero call that's oftentimes good. Okay.
Yeah, interesting one. Yeah.
So, but back to this hand. Where do we open raise it? And yeah, I think with the good suits, I would open raise it from MP, and with this, I would open raise it from only the cutoff. So I think that I agree with you here, and we are correct. Very nice. Okay, let's do one more interesting hand, I would say. This is definitely not one of those. This is, yeah, I think this is not too bad.
Ace queen six six deuce. Yeah, I think it's a very clear button open. I don't think I would open this one from the cutoff. And I really liked your approach, to think in the different levels.
Mm-hmm.
So at first glance, we see, okay, we're double suited. Second glance, we see we have a nut suit. And then if we go deeper, we see we have the ace and the queen suit, which is not great compared to having the queen of diamonds in this case. But there are some things that speak in favor of RFIing here and some parts of our hand that speak against it to open in the earlier positions. And therefore, with this particular combo, I would certainly open from the button, but fold it from all the other positions.
Yeah, I totally agree that it's at most a button open raise, but it seems fine with a suited ace being double suited. The deuce is always very bad for us to have. So I would even say it's kind of close from the button, but I would also definitely open raise it. There is a nice question in the chat about the quality of lower rundowns like 98765 and where to rate them in terms of quality. Yeah, I think this is very interesting because we are just talking about these quality aspects. So yeah, maybe this is now a good point in time to switch to the differences between 4-card and 5-card.
Yeah, before we move over, I just want to maybe to quickly summarize here for our audience. What's really important is to not rush through your decisions. As Matthias has shown, there are many different levels we can think about the hands. And I think as a novice player, you don't have these automatisms in place to make a quick decision and quickly go through these levels. And that's why I think this format is really good, because you're not under time pressure like in Streak or in a real game, but you can take your time to think through the different layers of the hands and come up with your decision, instead of making a very very quick decision and not really think deeply through the hand.
Yeah. So that's the first part of my warm-up routine. The second one we will show you later. It's going to be a post-flop one. But for now, let's stick to preflop a little bit longer as we have a nice question in the chat. And we also want to compare a little bit 4-card to 5-card in general, as I think a lot of you are transitioning from 4-card to 5-card. I think the transition from no limit to 5-card is not as common. So I assume most of you already have played 4-card PLO, and that's going to be interesting then to take a look at some differences between the two.
Let's do it.
Okay. So I will open raise. I will open up 4-card here. I will open up 5-card here. And then, yeah, should we start with the rundowns? Shall we go straight to rundowns?
Sure. Let's try to connect with the question in the chat.
Okay. So let's go to cutoff. So you can, if you saw this, it was a little bit quick. Preflop here in learn mode, and then you can build the situations either by generate and start from under the gun, or you can just click here. This will mark that the cutoff player is in the hand, and if you click on it again, it marks that hero, so that you are this position or want to look up this position. So if you want to look up our RFI, we just click on the cutoff here twice. First thing, we want to take a look at the raise first in. So is 5-card actually looser than 4-card? I mean, it would be logical because we have more cards. So equities run closer, so we can open raise more hands. Do you know the answer? I'm not sure how deep you are in 4-card, and
yeah, it's also mentioned in the course, or I've gone a bit into detail into that about the frequencies. I don't have the exact frequencies in my mind, but I know that the differences are super marginal, maybe like maximum 1 to 2 percentage points depending on the position. Yeah, so that's very marginal. And I think if you look at the games, on any poker sites, then you notice that people just like to VPIP way more pre-flop or to get involved with hands than in forecards. But the numbers are actually showing that we shouldn't really get looser drastically from all the various positions.
Yeah, I really like to see like how do things change between 2 cards, 4 cards, 5 cards. Not only because I like to think about the theory of poker, but also if I want to learn new games like 6 card, like my main game at these days is 6 card. So I definitely need to know like how can I build up now from 4 to 5 to 6 cards, like what concepts gets more important. And that's why I think it's also very important. There's no solver available for 6 card, and it's also going to be super complex to solve this game. So you get the edge by thinking about these things yourself. So let's start by comparing these 4 card to 5 card frequencies. We can see cutoff raise first in 30.9%, and cutoff raise first in 5 card gets even a little bit lower at 29.4%. So I think the main reason is we will look at this. Yeah, maybe let's talk about frequencies and also look at this here. So the reason is that you will get the blinds less and less because the defending ranges get higher. If you compare it to No Limit Hold'em, I think I'm super far away from No Limit Hold'em, like 10 years. But I think there is pretty much no cold calling in No Limit Hold'em from the button, for example, against the cutoff. It's either free bet or fold. So if we take a look at 4 card and 5 card, so this is 4 card now, we can see there is 12.2% calling and 8% free betting. And now look at 5 card, we see 14.5% calling and 8.5% free betting. So this is like 2% more calling and 0.5% more free betting. So there is going to be less chances to steal the blinds. So for me, this is the clear indicator why raising first in is a little bit lower in 5 cards than in 4 card, because yeah, there's just a little bit more defending. There's going to be less chances to steal the blinds. So your ranges need to be a little bit tighter. Also, yeah, equities are closer. And that's why, yeah, the pre-flop range advantage is not as emphasized as in a game like 4 card or even Hold'em. Anything you would like to add?
No, very, very good points made about, the players behind us getting more involved. And I think once we now will move one position further to the small blinds, it will be even more significant to see that there is less fold equity involved and that the small blind is doing also much more cold calling.
Yeah, we have
in 5
5 and
cards.
7 for 4 cards, and we have 8 and 6.4 for 5 card. So this goes up here as well. And then if we're in the big blind, let's take a look. Here we have 28.4 and 7, and here we have 31.2 and 5. So it adds up, and therefore, yeah, in general, we have less RFI, but it's all like you don't have to expect like now 10% difference. We said it already. It's like 1-2% difference in the RFI. And this is just the explanation, like why is 5 card just a little bit tighter, which might sound counterintuitive in the first place.
Yeah, and here again, just to make it clear, we're looking at GTO solutions and not, if we're up against players who are playing close to or pretty much perfect. But I would also say that what we observe in the pool, that players are just calling too much or opening too many hands. That will also be an outcome that when we are, especially in MP or the cutoff, there's a higher chance that players behind us get involved and we go more often multi-way than it is in a GTO environment. So I think that's also very important to keep in mind.
Yeah, I also know from experience. I did set up exploitative simulations as well, where like people are calling way more pre-flop, and then yeah, our open raising frequencies go down even more. I still think though that we can go with the ones that Vision gives us. First, because we want to move up, and at the higher stakes, we don't want to relearn our entire pre-flop strategy. But second, this is still, if we put too high calling frequencies pre-flop, this is still considered that these players will play perfectly post-flop, which is not the case at all. So you could even argue that you can go with more VPIP and PFR on lower stakes because people just make way more mistakes post-flop. So yeah, I would just go with the middle way and take these ranges and then stay with them and be fine, or yeah, get as close as possible to those. What do you think?
Well, I would argue maybe a bit different, like
Okay.
because certain hands that are very strong, like our aces or our strong Broadway rundowns, I think the EV that these hands will create will be much higher against players who are super loose and are just calling a lot pre-flop to basically make very nutted hands against hands that we really dominate. But then we have these like marginal opens that we also just looked at in the RFI trainer, like the ace queen 6-6 deuce. Like if we were to open this hand from the cutoff, for example, with a different suit combination and then go multi-way, I think that these hands will maybe start suffering a bit more and reduce in EV, whereas the stronger portion of our range will start creating much more EV in the positive direction.
Yeah, that's very nicely explained. Like this is pretty much another level that we could add up to the ones that we discussed before. Like if we are uncertain whether the hand is an open race, look at your opponents behind and then think about, okay, is it good for me to get multi-way with this hand? Is it bad for me? And then yeah, choose your decision respectively. One thing
Maybe that's a
that's
nice chance to tackle the question from the chat again, because there was the question if a hand like, for example, knight 8-7-6-5 is a hand that is really overvalued or overplayed at 5 card. So let's say if we find ourselves in the early position or an MP with a hand like this, like I would say, in a GTO setup, we can certainly play this hand because there's not a super high chance that we go multi-way. But if we know that we are guaranteed to play a 3-way, 4-way, or maybe even 5-way pot, what are your thoughts then about a hand like 9-8-7-6-5? Let's say even double suited.
Yeah, when I know that I'm gonna play a lot of multi-way pots, then the first and foremost important factor is nuttiness of a hand. Like, can I make the nuts and can I dominate weaker versions of my hand? For example, if I have aces, I can dominate kings, queens, and so on. If I have ace high flush, I can dominate king high, queen high, and so on. If I have 9-8-7-5 and I hit a straight, like what is left for me to dominate in a multi-way pot? There is only left like 3-4 something. So there is very little hope, and then most likely there's a flush draw on the board, so even 3-4 will have something on top that yeah, so either I won't get value from my hand or I don't even have a very good equity advantage, even if I dominate with a hand like this. And that's why you definitely have to think very, very carefully whether you want to open raise these nicely looking hands that are, in fact, like if you played enough of 5 card, you will learn it the hard way that this is not gonna be the hand that you really want to play.
Yeah, and I think maybe a point or a position we'll get back to later as well is the blind defense. Also with a hand like this. For example, if we go through the scenario that under the gun opens, everyone folds, it gets to us in the big blind, I think we can both immediately agree that a hand like 9-8-7-6-5 is a very clear defense.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about the hand, for example, when under the gun opens, cutoff calls, button calls, small blind calls?
Yeah, exactly. You're totally
Yeah.
right. It's again the same situation, but with the only difference that we already know that it's gonna be a multi-way pot, like it's 100% that we can confirm it. Yes, we are closing the action, so there's not gonna be a squeeze behind us, which is kind of nice. But then again, we have to think about we are now even out of position, and it's even harder to get value from weaker hands. And yeah, most of the time we are just getting dominated by other hands like queen jack, jack 10. So yeah, this is always screaming for trouble, and exactly the same thing that we pointed out before. Yes, we know this time that we are gonna play multi-way. We already invested some money in the big blind, okay, but most of the time we just mug this hand still.
Because some players might argue, like they're in the big blind and then there's an open raise, a call, and another call. And then I might argue, yeah, but I get so much better odds. I get a better price in a bigger pot. I just have to invest 2.5 big blinds into a pot of what is then 14 or 15 big blinds compared to just 7 big blinds when there's one opener. So maybe we can replicate these kind of scenarios in Vision to see, okay, when Underdog opens, how many hands do we call in the big blind? And how does it change, for example, when Underdog opens and the empty calls, or when Underdog opens an empty and cutoff call? Like how do these frequencies develop?
Yeah, let's do this. So first thing, we can still compare it to 4 cards. Maybe we will
Sure.
see something here. 22.8, 4.4, 28.7, and 3% free bets. Okay, so this is a huge difference, I would say. It's like 5% more defending here in the 5 card and less free betting here. So I guess that's the first major difference here between 4 card and 5 card. And
what do you think that is, that difference?
So there's not going to be a lot of hands that don't include an ace in this very strong. So the weakest hands that under the gun is open raising, we won't find a lot of hands that dominate this kind of hands. So we are out of position and we don't push a lot of equity with a free bet. I think this is going to be the main reason. And on the other hand, we are calling more, simply because the raw equity, so the hand versus hand equities in 5 card are just way closer still than in 4 card.
Which in conclusion also means, I guess, that we have an easier time to realize equity, right?
Exactly, yes.
Although we're out of position. Yeah.
Okay, I mean, let's go with this 9-8, 7-6-5 from before. We can see still suits is a thing. So yeah, 5 of a suit, 4 of a suit. This hand can even be thought about folding. So now you wanted to add another position, like MP.
So we can see we're defending in total like 29% calling. So what if, for example, Underdog opens and MP calls?
Okay, so this is now going from to 30.8 and 4.4. So squeezing always becomes interesting in general, or in theory, the more dead money is in the pot, because in theory we also have fold equity, decent fold equity. And if we don't have this fold equity, then immediately these hands will get out of our 3-bet range again, because these hands have the most value if they are played in a heads-up pot, so 1 versus 1, 2 players on the flop. And as soon as we are 3 players on the flop, it's gonna be harder. We can see, no, we are not starting to fold this hand, so it's still no gap, perfectly connected, and we have invested $1 into the pot, getting great odds. So this argument still is stronger than this, we are getting dominated too often argument. But I assume if we are adding gaps, we can quickly come to the point where where it gets to a fold. But also keep in mind, middle position calling range against an under the gun position open raise will not usually contain or consist of these type of cards. It's more like Broadway cards, kings kind of cards. So we have a lot of aces and kings or queens to face with. And then in theory, these hands are getting better again. That's why we can see this as a full call here. So that's why I think it's very important to understand the theory behind poker and not just only blindly learn the solver output. So understand every aspect of why a solver does the things they do. And yeah, I think this is the prime example for this as well. In weaker environments, I think the middle position calling range will block a lot more of our cards here than it is in a GTO environment.
Yeah, there are 2 things I'd like to add. Like also, if you just blindly copy a GTO solution and start squeezing here a lot, it might still not be the best play in most player pools, because squeezing here also relies on generating fold equity, especially against the under the gun opener. I think maybe we can look into this real quick. Like if we squeeze in the big blinds, how often are we actually supposed to take the pot down pre-flop or go heads up?
Yes.
And we can, for example, see that under the gun is supposed to fold almost 20% of the time of his opening range. And I would say in reality, that value goes pretty much closely towards zero by most opponents, that they just still want to go to the flop. And then we again struggle a bit with the same thing, that we risk domination when going always freeway to the flop instead of taking it down pre-flop or going heads up.
Exactly. So as we currently the section 4 card versus 5 card, I think this is something I wanted to point out before. Fold equity against 3 bets. I think this is pretty much the biggest difference, 4 card versus 5 cards. So how to set up the spot quickly. Again, we have big blinds under the gun and MP in the hand, and we are under the gun here facing the big blind squeeze. So here is under the gun, we click again here, and we have this spot set up, and we can see in 4 card we are folding 40.5% against this big blind squeeze, compared to, again, only 18.6% in 5 card. So I think this is the single most biggest difference, 4 card versus 5 card. Yes, a little bit more cold calling, especially in position, but then also the big fold versus 3 bet difference. I mean, and again, this is something, if you take, for example, no limit hold'em, I think this is something like 60 to 70% fold versus 3 bets. I'm not sure about squeeze. So this goes, if we add, or if we go Omaha 4 cards, we have this going down to 40%. If we have 5 card, it's 18.6%. And then we can assume if we play 6 card, for example, this might be somewhere around 10%. So yeah, folding versus 3 bet gets also less and less of a thing, which might also be a reason why the squeeze and 3 bet frequency in 5 card goes down compared to 4 card.
And yeah, I think you really interestingly mentioned the cold call from MP, which is a very tight range, and that, you know, under the guns range and MP's range are a bit in conflict with each other, that there's a lot of overlap in their ranges, like very symmetrical ranges, aside that under the gun has more aces, but for the rest, I think their ranges are quite similar. And then actually many of these like middle-low rundowns start to be quite good for us because there's less domination. So if we go one step, if we go back here to under the gun opens, MP calls, and it's up to us in the big blind, I think we're looking at like, what was it, 31% calling or so?
Back to the big blind.
Like under the gun opens, MP calls, and then it's up to us in the big blind.
Yeah,
So
this should be
around
it.
30.8%. And how does the frequency change, for example, when under the gun opens and button calls? Because the button cold calling range is much wider, and there might be more of a conflict with our defense range in the big blind. So let's maybe have a look how that changes.
Doesn't seem to change a lot, right?
Okay, yeah.
So
just try to check
I guess
it out.
I guess it's just built differently, but the frequencies might stay the same.
Yeah.
I guess.
And maybe to complete the picture, if we add 2 cold callers, I'm not sure if it works in this pre-flop setup, but if we have like an under the gun open, let's say a
like
cutoff
this,
and a button cold call.
Yeah, exactly. Here we see a difference that we are holding a bit more.
Yeah, 10% actually, quite significant, going from 30% down to.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch the numbers before. Do you recall them?
Against under the gun MP, we had 30.8, and now it's down to 20.8.
Okay, yeah, so that's really significant.
But also more squeezing, yeah.
Yeah, so I assume the squeezing goes up a little here. Okay, so yeah, this is already quite deep, but I think kind of important. So what else do we have? Yeah, I would say let's talk about aces pre-flop. And when we are already comparing 4-card to 5-card. So are there any aces that we fold pre-flop, say from under the gun?
I think the aces that we might be folding are trip aces, but I think 2 aces in our hand we are never folding.
I would say the same.
But there are pre-flop scenarios where we are folding aces. And that is, for example,
know about them
in the small blind. So if under the gun opens and it comes to us in the small blind, if I remember correctly, there's like a 5% of our aces that we fold, which was quite surprising at first glance as well.
Even 9%. So
even
let's
9%.
Let's exclude the trips aces. And then we have your 5% perfectly called. And yeah, if we take a look at the type of aces that we are mainly folding, it's the ones that are not containing a suited ace. So some of them where the ace suit is with free suits. So this is going to be the most important pattern to look at. Like free suits with the ace is super or way worse than an ace with 2 suits. Not only with aces, with every other hand. We already had it before. So yeah, that's a situation that where we are folding aces. What about facing a free bet, for example, under the gun and small blind free bets? Is this now a snap 4-bets with all aces, or do we again have? Yeah, like what are the frequencies? I don't remember them honestly. Here we are in position, but it's a small blind free bet, so might be quite strong.
I think indeed the fact that we are in quite early positions, like we have a very tight opening range, small blind has a very tight free bet range, which should also contain a lot of aces. I mean, we saw that small blind versus button, aces made up 40% of small blind's range. I would say that in this scenario, it probably goes up to 70%-ish, that small blind has aces. And then, of course, we have to be quite picky with our 4-bets because maybe we can also, after that discussion, open up the Run It Once equity calculator tool to actually see how bad in a shape aces can be in certain spots.
So what would be your guess call versus 4-bet ratio?
50-50.
50-50. I would say 40-60, so 60 raise. But in position, maybe your guess is better. It is 60-40, so the other way around. So yeah, in position we have here 60% call, 40% 4-bet. And as we are comparing it here with 4-card, of course we are not folding aces in 4-card. There are some trip aces, quad aces, whatever. We don't care about those. But in general, yes, 90% we are free betting them. And then facing the free bet here with aces, we have 0% folds. And then we have this 50-50 ratio between calling and 4-betting. And this nicely showcases the value of aces going down here in 5-card as we are going from 50-50 to 60-40 here in position. And taking a quick peek at the hands that we are now calling and not 4-betting, and we can see very easily that everything where we don't have the suited ace is mostly a call, and also the ace with free suits is even more a call than the offsuit ace ones. So again, shows how bad this is. Here we have the good single suited aces, which are still at 70% being called, and then when it comes to the stronger versions here, the best versions is a 76% free bet. And then if we compare these two, like the second ace has free suits, it's also going to be a 50-50. And yeah, why is that the case? And we have this PLO calculator at Run It Once, and I already have this one opened. Here we can see one position has ace 6 for deuce single suited, and the other position has ace, ace, jack, 9, 8 double suited, so a premium aces against an, I would say, yeah, below average version of aces. We can see that these type of aces with only being single suited to the ace is gonna be called at 70%, which means we should take a look at the side cards, and 6 for deuce side cards, pretty much the worst side cards, so definitely goes into the calling range of these 70%. And we can see ace, ace, 6 for deuce with all versions, all suits is always going to be a call. So the side cards here, too bad to do a 4-bet here ever. And the reason for this, we can see here, we have ties 24%, and then we only win 30% with the bad aces, and the good aces win almost half of the time. So if we sum up the equity, it's like 58 against 32 or 42. So yeah, being 42% pre-flop in a game like 5-card PLO is a very, very bad situation. And there you can see like how bad these aces are.
Yeah, very well put. And if we go back to that 4-card, 5-card comparison, I think
maybe let's just compare a random hand here against this premium aces here. We said we have like 42% with these weak single suited aces, and here with a random double suited hand, we are pretty much the same equity, and we would never think about like 4-betting such types of hands.
Yeah.
You wanted to add something?
Yeah. When we go back to the vision we were just in, we can see another interesting number if you just put the filter back to aces only, and not that ace 6 for deuce. And that is after opening and facing the free bet, we can still see that we have aces around a quarter of the time, just as the opener, right? So that says that out of all our opening hands from under the gun, aces make almost up a quarter of our range, which is quite a substantial part, and also basically implicates that small blind's free bet strategy should be quite tight as well. So maybe if we quickly click the pot button here and go back to the small blind and see how often our ace is actually part of small blind's free bet range.
Let me just add to that we only fold 2.1%. So free betting for fold equity is, even in a GTO environment, not a thing. So there is not going to be a fold versus a free bet. So no value gained from that. You said you wanted to go with the forward button, right?
Yep.
And now see that is the free bet range, right? This is how often small blind has aces.
Yeah. And we can see it's almost 60% of all free bet hands in GTO from small blind versus under the gun are aces. So, and that's not even what we earlier identified. Not all aces are free betting, right?
Yeah.
So it's only the good aces or the better combos. So we have, what it says about our under the gun strategy is we have to be pretty cautious and selective with the aces that we want to 4-bet in this scenario.
Exactly. So yeah, just to, we have like, what was it, 59, 60, something like this percent of aces in the small blind, or 60% of the aces we are free betting from the small blind against under the gun.
Maybe another interesting thing for these like really early positions is if we go back to the 4-better.
Yes.
To under the gun. And we go to the hand filter and say hands that are not aces. Like, are there actually any hands that are 4-betting in these like super tight positions that are not aces?
Yeah, that's also a very good point. And we can see there are 0% pretty much.
Yeah.
So that's kind of sick.
Pretty much nothing.
Yeah, I mean that I think there will be Oh, won't there be? No,
No.
0%. That's pretty sick. I didn't know that actually. That yeah. Crazy.
Once position get a bit looser, then we definitely start four betting some hands that are not aces. But even in loose positions, maybe we can have a look at that as well if we're already talking a bit about free betting and four betting. Let's say we're cutoff versus button and button free bets us. How many of our hands are we four betting that are not aces? I think that also would be an interesting thing to look at in like much looser positions. And I think the answer will still be quite
So
quite
here we are
small.
at 4% of our 14% range that are not aces here. So it's gonna be like what? Yeah, 70% maybe of our hands is gonna be aces in four bet pot in the losers positions.
Yeah. And we will also see that if we reverse the filter again and say, let's look at our aces, that there will be much more four betting going on because the proportion of aces in buttons free bet range will become much less because of the looser positions.
Exactly. Also, we are out of position, which is especially in 5-card. Yeah, very bad. We want to push the equity preflop when possible. But yeah, that's I think was very interesting to look up. And next thing, should we move to post flop and compare a little bit 4-card versus 5-card?
Let's do it. Yeah, let's maybe stick to the positions that you identified as the most common one.
Yeah, I think so too.
Button versus big blinds. Yeah. And I will take a 2-minute break while you're setting this up.
So button versus big blind we said. This is 4-card. And this is 5-card. Let's open the same board, I think is better for visualization. And again, I will only use the overview feature here because yeah, analyzing single boards will not be super interesting. So if you compare donking ranges now between 4-card and 5-card, and I think this is the same again as I've mentioned before, with if we take first a look at Hold'em, where there is, I think, pretty much close to 0% of leading, and then we added at some cards, we now at 4 cards, we can see there are 11% of leading, big blind versus button. And then if we add another card, we suddenly have 16% of leading big blind versus button. So again, if we would put this further to 6-card, I assume that there is going to be more leading here as well than this. So if you want to construct your 6-card ranges, these are all the things that you should think about. Maybe RFI is getting a little bit lower again. Fold versus free bet is not going to be a big thing anymore. Be very, very, very careful with aces. Start out folding some of the weaker aces pre-flop. And yeah, let's take a look at the boards. Like, do the boards stay approximately the same here that we want to lead here from the big blind? So we have here 9-6, 8-6. This is a similar pattern, I would say. So we still have these middle-ish cards, rainbow boards that are good for leading in 4-card, and we already looked at them in 5-card. So if we think about differences, 4-card to 5-card here, big blind leading, it seems to be very subtle, and in general, the concepts stay similar or close-ish, but just the general frequencies are going up. Like if we take a look here, the biggest board, the highest board is 25%. In 4-cards, in 5-card, the highest board is 29%. If we now compare it to the lowest, okay, let's exclude aces, I guess. So the lowest non-ace board is 29%, and here, oh no, that was not the, here the lowest non-ace board is 11%, and here the lowest non-ace board is 4%. So more leading throughout all the boards. So yeah, do you think you have an idea why this is the case? Where is there more leading in 5 card than in 4 card than in Hold'em?
You mean than in 4 card?
Yeah, like 5 card has more leading than 4 card. 4 card has more leading than Hold'em.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it just has to do with our range interaction on the board. Like the more cards we add to our hand, the more we start interacting with certain boards, like flopping mate hands, but also strong draws. And I think that's also why there's just more interaction with the board with our hands, and therefore hitting strong or decent hands more often.
Yeah, I think there is less and less these clear connections where you say, okay, one position can't have this card at all in their range, like in Hold'em, and then in 5 card you can say, yeah, there's not going to be a huge edge here from the button over the big blinds on more and more boards. So yeah, these frequencies go up. Let's also compare in position, because I think in position should stay rather the same. So we have 49 here in 4 card, we have 52 in 5 card. So yeah, there's way less of a difference here. And I would also guess that the boards here with ace high are staying roughly the same. So don't think we want to go into too much more detail here. In the freebet pots, I think there is a bigger difference, and that's why I think going over there should be more important. Except you want to add something to the single race pots differences?
Yeah, there's one last thing I'd like to add, and that is the leading part, because I think many players who don't really study 5 card and don't understand these like range versus range interaction we were just talking about, what they will end up doing is just auto checking out of position and not deciding to lead. And it will definitely have implications for the in position player, because a lot of the strong hands or strong blockers that big blind is supposed to lead on certain boards are all still in the checking range of the big blind, which then also forces the preflop raiser on the button to be a bit more conservative with the c-bets when the checking range just becomes much stronger for the out of position player.
Yeah, very, very nice point. If you move up the stakes, play higher stakes, I think there's also one nice observation that I made. People then know that some boards are good for leading, but then they are overdoing it. So once you are starting to implement stuff like leading ranges, be careful that you still stay balanced. Like a thing in 5 card and in 6 card you see very often, river changes the nuts. Let's say you hit the nut flush out of position and you are just pot leading it in, and there's no balancing anymore. You just see the nuts because you don't have enough knowledge. You just see level 0 or level 1 that we discussed before. Okay, I have the nut flush, so now I'm leading. Yes, GTO is also gonna lead a lot of these nut flushes, maybe like 70%, but it's also checking 30% of the nut flushes. So you need to see more levels than just, okay, I have the nut flush, so I'm gonna lead. So you need to see, okay, do I have 2 of a suit or 3 of a suit? Do I block opponents' calling ranges? Do I block opponents' bluffing ranges? What are my side flush cards? So there is a lot of more levels that you have to understand if you want to incorporate these leading ranges. If you want to still stay balanced, which is important because players will notice it. And yeah, if they can exploit you on these things, then it's better to not do it in first place. Especially talking about flop leading ranges. Like, I think even on PLO 1K and 2K, if I play button versus big blind and I see a board like 8-6-4, I immediately think like this guy is now, if it's a regular, it's gonna lead 70% here on the flop. And whenever they check, they suddenly are not balanced anymore with their checking range because they know, okay, this is a good board to lead on. And suddenly they don't think about it anymore that their checking range also needs to stay balanced. Otherwise they get exploited and this whole leading concept is suddenly costing them value or
Yeah.
EV in the long run. So yeah, this
Yeah.
is something I want to point
Very
out
well put.
about leading. So yeah, be careful about this, as yeah, the GTO leading frequencies go up in 5 card, 6 card, but yeah, be careful to not get exploited if you start to incorporate them. So yeah, I think we can move on to 3-bit pots.
Let's do it.
And first thing, we take a look at the overall frequencies. 26% checking in, like this is 4 card, 48 small, 26 big. And in 5 card, oh, there's way more checking, 36, 38, 27. And I think, like, I have a lot of issues in 3-bit pots in 5 card. I think in 4 cards, they are pretty easy oftentimes to play. In 5 card, I think they are super hard to play. And let me show you why I think that is the case. Let's start with the high card ace, with the ace high boards. 9% checking in 4 card, 67 small, 24 big. And in 5 card, we have similar frequencies, right? A little bit more potting, as we discussed before. Every connection, every ace high board or ace high suit on the board is suddenly worse for us, needs more protection. So we are playing with a higher portion of pot bets on these ace high boards. Okay, still, these are the easiest boards to play. Then if we switch it up to king high, I think in 4 card it's oftentimes pretty easy because you're oftentimes just playing it half pot with full range. And we can see, okay, the worst ones we are checking. We have here the 6-5, 7-5. We already know about these. And then there is this huge portion of boards where we are just full range checking as soon as there is a Broadway card. So that's quite easy to learn. And if we compare this now to 5 card, we suddenly have this, like we have 46 checking, 41 betting, and only 13% pot. So this 28% checking only of these on these very easy to recognize boards suddenly become a 46% checking and a 41% betting. So there's not gonna be any clear full range small boards anymore. Suddenly you have to think on every board about checking and betting. And yeah, all these tendencies are getting way thinner. And there is no like, okay, I know this is king high with the Broadway, this is a half pot. And yeah, this goes on and on for all the other high card boards. And I think this is a very big difference to 4 card. And yeah, as I said, I myself have also a lot of troubles really learning these with having one more card on top of all these.
Yeah, I fully understand your struggle, and I think it's a super hard spot to master, because like we talked about the different levels when it comes to the pre-flop hand selection, and that will also be true for post-flop.
Yeah.
Like how are all our sidecards interacting with the boards in terms of connectivity, but also in terms of suits and backdoor suits. I think the king high, queen high boards are also really interesting because in 4 cards, like to connect the dots to the pre-flop hand selection, I think we free bet hands like kings and queens much more aggressively, small blind versus button. So there will also be more sets basically for our small blind free bet strategy. Whereas in 5 card, we definitely slow down when it comes to free betting kings and queens pre-flop. So we'll also start struggling a bit more on these like king high, queen high boards, which drives down our c-bet frequency.
Yes. Okay.
Maybe we can do some go for some hand examples when we go for practice the spot.
Yeah,
Go
I
for some
think
hands and yeah, maybe we can pick some kind of ace high board. Maybe we can pick some kind of these like middling, connected, suited, or rainbow boards and see yeah, what our thoughts are on our actions.
yeah. When we before were talking about like steps, what to do, we now had start off with the streak with the raise first in, perfection them with the RFI trainer, and then if you go to post flop, start with the overviews, and then the next step to practice the overviews could also be to check this box here, practice the range frequencies. We will see what this does in the next example, but first, yeah, we're gonna have here an interesting spot, and knowing flop frequencies is gonna be very important because in 5-card here, if we, for example, here know that this is either this is a board where we do very little potting, then at least one option is already kind of gone to think about, and yeah, then we have to only think about 2 options. So here, very strong hand. Question checking versus betting. So check raise most of the time versus betting. Can you help me out here?
Yeah, like one comment I also want to make when looking at these free bet pots is that we already get a piece of information that we can learn as well, and that is that this hand is a free bet hand pre-flop, right? I mean, this hand is kind of obvious, but we might come across certain hands where we think like, oh, I actually would never free bet this hand, but now I'm in the spot where the solver said, ask me what to do with this hand in a free bet pot, which is an indication that there might be hands which you don't even consider free betting, but once the solver shows up with it, yeah, that something might be not correct in your overall strategy. And so we understand now with this a bit of more of an obvious hand that ace, king, queen, 10, 10, double suited with the ace high suit and the king high suit is a free bet, small bet versus button. And on this board, I find it an interesting hand because if we check it to the button with your idea of check raising, the question is also, you know, what kind of hands could button stab with that we can kind of check and get to fold, or what the bluffs are in button's shoes. And I think by holding the queen and also holding the pocket tens, we block a lot of the bluffing components that button should find in his hand to make a bet, which decreases the likelihood of button betting, and therefore also decreases the likelihood of us getting in the check raise against button's bet. And therefore, with the components in our hands, I don't want to allow button to check back with some weaker flush draws or some top pair kind of hands as well, and rather try to extract value immediately. That would be kind of my take on this hand for half pot.
Yeah, I totally agree. First thing, always think about what do we have in our hand. Okay, we have the nut flush draw. Great. We have tens, so we are blocking straight draws. So this can mean 2 things pretty much. Like this is like how I like to think about it. Blocking straight here, as you already mentioned, makes it less likely that we face a bet here. So the question is, does our hand want to face a bet or not? So this hand definitely wants to face a bet, or is fine with facing a bet that contains bluffers and mate hands. So yeah, it's bad if we check this hand and don't get a bet. So if this would be a weaker hand, like if we don't have the nut flush draw on top, there's also another way that we can use the blockers here, the 10 blockers, and it's the way of using them as an insurance for later streets. So if we have a kind of a weak hand that will be ending up as a bluff catcher most of the time, having the tens here is making it less likely that they have the straight. So if the straight comes up, we can call down thinner than we usually would. So yeah, this might be also a thought that we have if we had here a weaker combination of this hand.
So maybe once we look for the solution for this hand, we can also check what we would do. I think if we have the ace of clubs instead of the ace of hearts, with the 10 of hearts,
I really like
still
to check the various versions of our hand. Also, if we had like a spade flush draw, yeah, okay. I mean, we can't have the queen of spades, but king 10 of spades. Like, how would this change it? Yeah, usually if you have backdoor flush draws, it helps you to decide between half pot and full pot, because if you have a backdoor flush draw, you oftentimes prefer the half pot because you don't mind to see runouts as much. And if you need more protection, don't have the backdoor flush draw, oftentimes pot might be the better play. But yeah, okay. You're fine with going half pot here?
Yeah.
Okay, so this hand actually is gonna be a check, and now this is gonna be an interesting one to look up various categories to think about why this might be a mistake or not. And so general frequency is very important. As we said, if there is only 11% pot, this oftentimes means that only very niche versions are gonna go for the pot line, and we shouldn't think too much about this one. So what I like to do here, if I'm close here, or if I'm incorrect, because it's kind of close, right? Because if we have here a spade on top, then it actually likes to go for the bet a little bit more. And this actually makes me think that we like to check this hand even though we have the tens, because there's still enough bluffing potential for our opponents with holding two spades. So if they have like top pair, there are so many various draws, weaker flush draws, with backdoor flush draws on top, it makes it suddenly a better bet for them. And that's why we can go for a slow play here more often. And also the thing that I said before, if you're blocking the tens, there's still a good shot that a good chance that we get bluffs here from straight completing cards. So we don't mind too much giving free cards, as we pretty much know that one type of hand is not in his range too much, that they want to rep though if they have one blocker or two blockers of this of the straight. Okay, so second thing, what version of our hand would have preferred to bet instead? And
it's like all the bluffs, right, that don't have a lot of immediate or backdoor equity.
Exactly. I just want to say, are they stronger or are these the weaker combinations? And clearly the weaker combinations of this hand would like to bet. But yeah, still all kinds of backdoor flush draws backup is fine. So do you think this is just for immediate fold equity, ending the hand?
Yeah, I think if we, like with the blockers that we have, there's, I think, a lot of fold equity that we generate. And if we do get raised with all these hands that we bet and don't have the flush draw, then I would also think that we fold all of them against the raise.
Exactly. So these are very weak combinations of this hand. So having top pair blocker and tens, these are pretty much key cards that increase our fold equity. And yeah, if we have top pair, top kicker, pretty much increasing our fold equity and even being able to barrel multiple streets with our tens ourselves, suddenly our hands becomes a bluff and goes into the betting.
And maybe some novice players, when they don't hold the flush draw here and bet and get raised, they are still getting it in, which of course is not a great play in my opinion. That they think, okay, I have top pair, top kicker, I have a gut shot, maybe backdoor flush draw, like enough equity to stack off, especially when you come from like a no limit hold'em background, like top pair, top kicker would, I guess, be almost the nuts here on this board after you bet and get raised. But yeah, the more cards we add going to 4 card and then from 4 card to 5 cards, the more we have to be aware that these kind of marginal made hands in form of top pairs with very little backup perform extremely bad against strong ranges.
Yeah, and also there is this feature in Vision where you can create or generate random hands of villain's range and see what villain would do in GTO against our check here. So let's say, okay, we check our hand, and then we can see like what are the type of hands that villain is gonna check or bet, and how much equity do these hands have. Of course, we could also now evaluate whether all these hands that villain has would call or fold against the raise. So we already see that there are a lot of hands that are checking back, But for example, we can also see these hands that would pretty much certainly fold are going to bluff here. We can also see that similar hands here. Our blockers are gonna bluff here at times. And if we are having, if we are blocking so much, then it's gonna be hard for them to also call our continuation bet. So this is where the slow plays come in that we are using here.
Yeah. One argument I also want to bring in, and this is also kind of, you know, based on my own observations when playing myself, that when we scroll, like when you just click through all these hands and we come across bluffing hands that in position should show up with, then I would argue that many players won't find certain bluffs that are more counterintuitive. For example, we just saw, I think, ace-9, 8-3-3 with a heart. I think a lot of players would just try to check back and, you know, try to spike some equity or improve with their hand instead of going for an immediate bluff, which then, of course, also harms the EV of our check line when opponents, you know, don't show up with all the bluffs they should show up with in this spot.
Correct. Also, this hand here is a good candidate to check as it's blocking its own outs. So this hand has actually a big issues barreling 3 streets. So Solver likes to check back these hands. Like if you think about it, like when is ace, like queen 9-9 gonna be the nuts to the river? So you never wanna barrel too much here with these very vulnerable hands on board texture like this. So yeah, yeah.
Maybe one idea of this hand to check back is also that we block really the continuing range of the small blind. That small blind would just, you know, check fold a lot.
True.
And that we also have some good bluff catchers on a blank on the turn by checking back and allowing small blind to take another step.
Exactly. So we checked this feature here before. So this is the practice range frequency feature. So now we have 10-5 deuce, and we are here able to adjust the checking, this 50% and the pot size betting according to what we think our range is gonna do on this board here. So we have a disconnected board that would be perfect to pot if we are if it wasn't single suited, but being single suited already big difference here in 5 card. So I would say maybe something like this.
Yeah, I think it's very tricky to come up with a good or like a really accurate estimate because we also have multiple sizings. But I would think that we do actually even a bit of less potting in 5 cards and do a bit more checking. So I would go to something like let's say 30, 50, 20 or so.
Okay.
So 20, 20, 50, 30, 50, 20. Yeah.
30, 50, 20. We have 40, 40, 18, kind of for the 40, 40, 20. So yeah, very nice, very nice. Still, you can set a difficulty here for this. So normal is gonna be 15%, confidence interval, hard is gonna be 10%. So you are allowed to be off very always a little bit of a fewer margin. So yeah, as we can see, this is already a tricky board again. Like if you are playing 4 card a lot, I think this is way easier here again, but maybe I'm wrong. Let's check what the frequencies would be here. 10-5 deuce. We have it with the 10 high. So here. So yeah, my estimate is a little bit more like the 4 card solution. So yeah, 10-5 deuce. And 4 card has way less checking, 25% checking was 41. So yeah, we already see that this is gonna be a tricky board here. to solve.
And
And that's why I said, I think 3-bet pots are just very, very hard, and surely the thing that I should practice the most at the moment, because there are just so many components that you have in your hand. And yeah, frequencies are quite balanced for a lot of the boards that you get. Okay, so what do we have here? Very interesting hand again, like every hand that we mostly have.
That's the thing with 5 cards. There's always something going on with our hand and the board.
Yeah.
It's never boring.
Yeah.
If a heuristic I kind of remember from some similar hands, and maybe it applies here as well, is that on this board we saw potting is not so often a thing. Like, what was it, 18%? I think with the ace of hearts in general, we definitely want to do quite a lot of betting here. It's not a great hand that I think plays super nicely in the check line, especially when having 3 spades. So by ruling out the potting, I wouldn't be super comfortable to pot get it in here, although we have the gut shot and backdoor spades with 3 spades, but we also block the the nut flush draws from our opponent, so it's likely that our opponent has some kind of mate hand or like a combo draw. So I would half pot here and actually fold versus a raise. That would be kind of my line here, since we're also half potting what was close to 40%, 45%. But I gotta say it's a tricky spot with this hand and on this board.
Yeah, I agree to your points. I think pretty much 100%. What I always like to think about is turn playability with my hands. So I see, okay, I can represent a nut flush on the turn. I can represent, or I have a backdoor nut flush draw if the spade comes out, and I even have a gut shot, so that's also additional equity. Also on turns like queen, jack, king, 9, all is very good, gives me additional equity. So I'm not really scared of turns. So that's also a reason why I would rule out a pot here. So yeah, turn playability is for me oftentimes the point where I decide between half pot and full pot. And then the checking, I think I do 2 less. Maybe I'm imbalanced with my checking, like we saw before. I wouldn't have caught this check. So yeah, I think in general I do too little checking, too much half potting, but I still would say this is a nice half pot here. And we can see that this time we are right. Very nice. We can also see there's a little bit of like we could also pot this hand without losing EV. That's also always nice to see. So it would be rather a pot than a check, is what I want to say. And yeah, I guess this also makes sense. And I think though it's a pot get it in if we start to pot it, because there's just too much money in the middle. And yeah, just not enough hands. I think that we are doing really poorly. Could be wrong though. I could be wrong though.
No, I think if we are potting this hand, then we're also getting it in. Also, like with that exact suit combination, I would be very surprised if we fold. I think against hands like 2 pairs, pair with flush draws, we're not performing super bad. Obviously against sets, that's the biggest problem. But other than that, I think our equity will be okay-ish after we have invested so much money into the pot. Yeah.
So I've been sorting it now by potting. So what would be better to pot? And better to pot would be if we have worse playability on the turn, right? Like we don't have a backdoor flush draw. We don't have the turn won't bring a heart very often, the card that we want to bluff, but gives us immediate equity boost on the flop. So both these with the nut flush draw and the non-nut flush draw is just good for our raw equity, but doesn't really want to see turns as much as the hands that we have here. And then if we go to the check, so clicking here on the check, we can see the weakest versions here of our hand. They want to go for a check, so don't want to put in money and waste our equity, I guess, with a bet fold.
Yeah. Something interesting maybe we can look at, which is a feature I like in Vision as well, is when we go, you talked about, the turn playability. So if we would continue here by half potting and button calls, then I think there is a possibility in Vision also to give you a breakdown on your action on the different turn runouts. And I think that's it's a pretty cool feature as well to see, okay, for example, on this free rainbow, after we half pot and get calls, what I think we can also put in our hands, like ace, queen, jack, 4.
Okay,
And
so you want to know like what does this hand do on various turns, right?
exactly,
So
yes.
yeah, we put in our hand ace, queen, jack, 4. I think you can also right click, by the way, the hand, and it will copy it to your clipboard already. So yeah,
Okay.
if we leave the board filter empty, it's gonna take a little bit of time, as you can see, to compute all the various turns.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you
Maybe in
said,
the meantime we can brainstorm about this turn, right?
exactly, yeah, that's also good. And I think like the easiest way to spot whether I'm playing autopilot or not is my time bank. Like if I'm feeling like, oh my god, there's way too little time bank on a certain poker site, then I think I'm playing my A game. And if my time bank is full, then I think I'm deviating for it, because even look at this turn now. There's still so much to think. We could talk so much about the flop alone. So these 10 seconds before the time bank activates, or I'm not sure how long it is, it shouldn't be enough if you have enough knowledge about the game and play your A game. Try to perform is what I pretty much want to say.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's a super interesting turn because some hands, I would say we have almost dead now. For example, a hand like, King, Queen, Jack 10, whatever side cards, Jack 10, 9, 8, like all the rundowns that connect with the 10 are pretty much dead. As long as they don't have a flush draw, of course. I think also a lot of sets can be ruled out. So board pair, I wouldn't really be afraid of. And then even a heart on the river is maybe not necessarily a bad card because we can. I mean, it's a deuce of hearts. I guess we just try to get the showdown. But if it's like a queen of hearts, I think there are again some options we have to check call or to check raise. Would be now a bit advanced maybe to talk about this like river spot. But I think a lot of hands basically are hands like 10x, 5x, and the turn for our range is also not great, I would say. Like this low card connectivity as a free better is not that great. So I think I would opt to check here to give my opponent first of all some rope, but also to allow him to, I don't know, river some two pairs with the kind of rundowns, yeah, things like that. And I think especially with the ace of hearts, I'm not too afraid of rivers here.
Interesting. Yeah. So my thought is a little bit different, I think. So most of the time, if they had like a pair plus a flush draw, it's gonna be a raise on the flop for them. So I think most of the time they either have like the pair or the pure pair slash two pair, or the mediocre flush draws. Both of which I think will call on this turn rather than betting themselves. And also we are blocking the backdoor flush draws. So yeah. Next question is, how do I want to utilize the nut flush blocker throughout my hand? Like, do I want to use it as a call down feature, so that even if a heart comes, that I can find a call? Do I want to use it as a donk? That I think if my opponent doesn't have enough flushes, I don't think I want to use it like this. So I think I'd rather bet here and get some value here.
Yeah, interesting about the donk or like the river heart run out. I think with our hand, which has enough showdown, I would always check and try to get it to showdown. But let's say we would have had ace, queen, jack, 6, and the river is like an 8 of hearts. I think then I would rather use my hand as a bluff with like very, very weak showdown value.
So I go with your decision this time. You said check, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is pot. So this time
Okay.
I'm right. So what would be, again, first thing I want to know, what would be the versions of this hand that rather check? And it turns out that these are the ones without the ace of hearts. So meaning we want our opponent to have the ace of hearts. Because this is a hand where if we check, they are gonna bet way more, and suddenly we get it in on the turn. But if we are blocking all the nuts and nut flush draws, and not the pairs, then they will rather check back, is what I would read into seeing this. Maybe let's take a look at what they are supposed to call, because this also we oftentimes can see like, is this something that our opponent is also doing? How much equity do we have against the calling range? So
What I
queen
also
check.
like to see is actually our overall
Yeah,
frequencies.
yeah. Let's go
Like
to this.
that this turn is actually quite bad for our range. Like we're checking
Yeah,
83% of the time on this turn with our overall range. So definitely a turn I think where we should consider to check a lot.
yeah. So range play definitely favoring your. And that's also something I wanted to point out before we were looking at the results. Like, what are the good cards for our range? What are the bad cards for our range? So yeah, but yeah, let's take a look at this hand first. What we would do with this hand on certain runouts, like what are the good cards for our hands, what are the bad cards for our hands. So maybe let's take a look at the bad cards first. The one, like the turns that we are not, that we wouldn't bet here, are, for example, the 10. So top pair, definitely very much in his calling range if we are blocking the nut flush draw, and no board pair, and the rest is 5 and deuce. So 10 should always be a super bad card. Everything that connects between 10 and 5 with the 5 itself as well. And yeah, also these.
Excluding the 8 and the 9, I guess, because they give us added straight draws, whereas the 7 doesn't give us added straight draws. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah,
I think the deuce is also pretty good, right? Because deuce X shouldn't be much in buttons range, so board pairs like 10 or 5 are not ideal, but I think the deuce is not so problematic. I don't see it here, so it's probably somewhere.
it should be good.
It should be good, yeah.
It's here.
Yeah.
With the full range bet.
Oh yeah, I see it now. Yeah.
So we pretty much bet most of the cards. I mean, yeah, there's difference between small and pot. So yeah, the only cards that we are not betting are these between the 10 and so 10. Yeah, let's call it by the name 10, 7, 6, 5, 4. And some of the flush cards that also improve us though. So a lot of the flush cards that we can see here, they are gonna be a bet for us. But there are also flush cards where we can just take the showdown value. Or we don't have a lot of full equity in first place because they contain a lot of hands in the calling range, like the king. They can have kings often if we don't block a king and so on. And the 8 brings in 2 pair straight draws that they are not folding. So yeah. These are mainly the hands. Yeah, if you make a straight, no reason to bluff. Or ace of hearts. So yeah, I think makes total sense here on this overview. And there is also, we can also look at the range. So this now means how is our range? So forget the ace, ace, queen, check 4. What are good or bad turns for our range in general? And we can see, yeah, the 3 of diamonds is actually for our entire range a very bad card, as we exclusively pretty much have the ace 4 here that hit the cards, this card strong. No backdoor flush draw, no flush draw that comes in. And yeah, again, it's pretty much all these low cards that we already had before anyways. And then if we take a look at the best cards for us, yeah, makes sense, of course, the ace and the deuce being kind of irrelevant for both ranges. And then all these cards that bring additional draws.
Yeah, maybe some viewers don't understand why the deuce is a great card in terms of equity. Like the main reason behind it is obviously flush draws are still somewhat live against us, but a lot of hands like rundowns that contain a 10 or a 5 are now drawing to 2 outs basically. Whereas before they had a lot of 2-pair outs or some straight draws to turn or even wraps. But yeah, when a turn pairs the deuce, then the equity drop for these hands is just massive, going from maybe 40-45% to only 5% on the turn.
Yeah, and now coming back to hands in villain's range, we can also see the equities that we have with our hand against theirs. And we can see this is actually a great hand. Like it's a gut shot, it's a flush draw that's not dominated, and some set outs are not live, but they only have 26%, so they even get it in here. So great for us getting it in 74% on the turn here. Here we are facing the nuts, which of course will be quite rare to face. And also even these hands, like this is a pure flush draw and they are supposed to call. So this is of course amazing. And yeah,
I guess it has to imply that small blind has to come up here with some semi bluffs as well, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're only up against aces or better with queen, queen, jack, and a queen high flush draw, and you're only looking at slightly above 20% equity, then you're not getting the price anywhere close to what you need with the odds in play.
Yeah.
So I would kind of question that players are really getting in like bare queens with a flush draw here, or like something like queen jack jack.
Yeah.
Because players in the small blind just don't come up with enough bluffs. But yeah, interesting. So I guess the next question that you could investigate if you were to study in Vision is like, what are my bluffs here? Yeah, or semi bluffs.
Yeah. So you can go as deep as you want, pretty much. But yeah, I don't think we have the time because we also want to take a look at other features. So if we take a look at these tabs here, there's also a report tab, and there's gonna be, so you're gonna be able to revisit all the hands that you have practiced. And so if you click on them, you can then, for example, also go back in the hand. So if you now want to know, okay, I want to see another hand on the flop, like what does this hand do on the flop, or look up something else, you can go back and forth there. And also at the end of your session, you can toggle the correct answers so that you are only left with the incorrect answers, and then you can just click and open up the hands that are incorrect and then go step by step from there. So we had this hand that we had incorrect as a bet. So now we know there's a check, and with the next you can iterate through the hands that you have practiced, and also on this turn the pot was correct. And yeah, now we are done here with the review of our mistakes. So that's always a nice way to finish up your practice session. Next step sorry?
You wanted to go to the tab, so please go first.
Yeah, so next thing is notes. I really like to take notes because, there's a lot of different runouts in various situations that you can face. For example, we talked about this one before. This is a 100 BB single raise pot under the gun versus big blind. And the question is versus bet. So we are now in the big blind, single raise pot, under the gun bet flop, under the gun bet turn, and now the flush hits. And yeah, we were discussing before, like, okay, if we have the nut flush here, how can we find the proper distribution between leading and checking and check raising? And this is where I think 99% of players will be unbalanced, because they should lead 43% and check 52% of the nut flush. So if you are at level 0 and only realize, okay, I have a nut flush, then yeah, you will not be able at all, except for randomizing maybe when to lead and when to not lead. And that's where I think the node feature is great. So you only have to open up a spot, then press the plus icon, and then you can add nodes to this spot. For example, nodes for this board that I made is, okay, how to play ace with 2 hearts. If we are blocking spades, we read a pot. So yeah, if we're blocking spades, then our opponent didn't bet the backdoor flush draw on the turn, so the chances are higher that they have a flush than they have the busted backdoor flush draw that they would bluff. We should rather, if we are blocking straight draws, we should rather pot ourselves, because then again, chances are higher for them to have the flush. Blocking pairs, we rather check, because pairs are now need to bluff because there's a straight and a flush there, so they don't have enough showdown value. And yeah, so there. And yeah, if we have 3 hearts with our nut flush draw, we are betting less. So yeah, because then they have less flushes to call, they have more bluffs themselves. So these are some thoughts that you can build up, like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and then think about in game, what type of these components you have. And that's why I say that's the great fun of playing games like 5 card, 6 card, even 4 card. Like in Hold'em, yeah, you have the nut flush and that's it. But yeah, in 5 card you can have so many other things to think about that you.
Yeah. Amazing feature. Yeah, I'm actually not using that very often. I always saw there's this node section, but yeah, the way you present it, I think I'm also gonna start using it way more often, because that's really, really handy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess in this spot, what's interesting as well, I mean, we're just talking about the node section, but of course, immediately I start thinking about the different combos when you were talking about the strategy. For example, I guess blocking the ace, having the ace of hearts and blocking the queen of hearts could be another factor as well, right?
Yeah.
Blocking the second nut flush.
Yeah.
And also what I would always be curious about is like, what is the proportion of having only the ace of hearts versus the nut flush, right? Like how many ace of hearts blockers do we have in the spot, and how many nut flushes do we have?
Yes. 2 very good points, and we can immediately see if we have ace of hearts and queen of hearts, we are never checking here, because then opponent is not gonna value bet the weaker flushes. And yeah, then we have also the other side, right? Like, what if we face a lead here? And again, most people are simplifying to, if I have the king of hearts, not possible here because it's on the board. But if I have the second nuts, I'm just calling, and let's exclude the ace of hearts. So if we have the second nuts, we are calling, and if we have the anything else I'm folding, is oftentimes a very common strategy. But yeah, this is, for example, the hand classes feature. So we can now, like, let's make it first with an empty filter, so that we can take a look at what our range does against the pot size lead here. Like, keep in mind, we have bet the flop, bet the turn, and then we face a lead on the river. And yeah, here we can see queen high flush is calling 84%, 10 high flush is supposed to call 68%. Lower flushes are even better calls, similar good calls to queen high flushes. So again, this is it's way too little if you just think about, okay, I have queen high flush, so it's a call, I have low flush, so it's a fold. That's definitely not how it's the case. Even straights can be, with a flush blocker, good calls here against the pot size lead. So yeah, this is the hand classes feature, where you can then pretty much analyze where are the thresholds, which type of hands do you call. And yeah, then again, like, this board has so much to offer. It has pairs, it has straights. So yeah, way better to have a low flush with a certain with unblocking certain hands than having just the queen high flush and think at level 0.
Yeah, very, very cool observation and a cool feature, for sure. And yeah, I just wanted to quickly jump back to the observation. Like, for example, in this spot, if we think big blind versus under the gun, we're check calling the flop, we're check calling the turn. There shouldn't really be a lot of bare ace of hearts hands, right? That we have. So I would be curious, for example, as well, like what is the proportion of having the ace of hearts only and the nut flush? Like what proportion does it make up of our range? And are we always bluffing the ace of hearts if we are, let's say, worse than 2-pair, something like that? For example, if we see. Yeah.
Okay, so we have here ace of hearts without a flush. We can see that 1 pair, which are pretty much our bluffs, are bluffing here at 99%. And yeah, 2 pair are a mix, and then straights are always a check, of course, because we can easily check call this. So yeah, this is the hand classes, and we can also see ace of hearts, the blocker, we have 6%, and the flush, the nut flush, we have 17.5%.
Yeah. So way higher proportion of flushes compared to just the bare.
Yeah, keep in mind, flushes we are supposed to lead 43% if we have them, and the blocker we are supposed to lead 69% of the time. So yeah, that's again something. So I just want to say, like, there is still so much edge in this game. Like, if you think about it very at a low level, you might think, okay, equities are super close. This is just a game where you gamble it up. And it's also attracting a lot of recreational players for that. But then if you are starting to look at these things, it just gets so fun and so exciting to study and learn more about it. Like, now I would immediately like to know, okay, what other hands other than the ace of hearts blocker are donks here in a GTO environment? Like, if, like, for example, here, if someone is only calling a queen high flush, then I can pot all queen of hearts here profitably and out of position. And also I ran a sim where I said, okay, out of position is always leading here with the blocker and the nut flush. And then it turned out that we are calling here, I think, 2 pair with a heart blocker every time, if that's the strategy of out of position. So you can exploit all these tendencies of players that never looked at a solver or want to learn or are at a very low level of thinking. You can exploit them very easily.
Yeah.
And that's a great aspect of this game as well.
Yeah. And while, going through these hands, going through these runouts, I would always try to keep in mind as well, like, what does population do?
Yeah.
For example, if we have the nut flush here, I think a reason why players always end up donking their nut flushes is that the in-position players are not value betting thin enough.
Yeah.
For example, second nut flushes, third nut flushes, and maybe are also not bluffing enough. So maybe as a nice deep wrap up of this stream session today, we can quickly check it over to Under the Gun and see, is, for example, Under the Gun always value betting queen high flushes or 10 high flushes?
So this is how Under the Gun is supposed to play. And we can see ace high flush, even queen high flush they check sometimes. So yeah, ace high flush is pretty much exclusively potting. Also, a third barrel here on this card has never a small sizing. So if we are betting the third barrel here, we are representing nuts here very heavily. And so that even the queen high flush in 5 card, go back to minute 1 pre-flop, falls off in value a lot and is not even able to free barrel here a lot of the time. So That's definitely a nice input. And then on the other hand, if we take a look at one pair hands, they are pretty much always potting here. Take overpairs, like an overpair with a flush blocker here is pretty much always betting. We can see, yeah, the flush blocker is mandatory. So yeah, pairs, bluffs with flush blockers here are most of the time just a pot bet, same as the nut flushes. And then we are already at the correct frequency. So this is a spot that's kind of easy to play. So bet your bluffs with hearts and bet your ace high flushes. And then the queen high flushes might be the most interesting category that you want to practice in isolation. So what you can also do in Vision is you can, for example, filter here for queen high flushes and then press this icon here to only practice the filtered hands. So now we are only getting queen of hearts, and if we now would practice the spot, then we only get queen high flushes. So we can practice this category isolated, take notes again, and then see, okay, what's the thresholds for second nut flushes in this situation that's also coming up, of course, very frequently in a real game.
Yeah, maybe let's do that real quick. Like, let's exclude the ace of hearts and then do a couple of reps with this kind of, let's say, more marginal value bet, which some players might struggle to come up with, and see what the heuristics are behind, between checking and betting with a queen high flush. Because I would say I don't have an intuition on this spot. Like,
Yeah,
I
me
couldn't
neither.
immediately come up with, like, on level 0 or level 1, like, these are the queen high flushes I want to bet, and these are the ones I want to check. If I would think about level 1, then I would say I don't want to block the pairs on the board. Like, I want my opponent to have as many pocket jacks, king jack as possible. So based on that heuristic, I think we already have a great example here with queen 10 9 9 7, because we don't block any of the pairs on the board, and we also block the straight draws, which makes it likely that our opponent doesn't block the straight draws, which means there's more bluff catch potential. And therefore, I would definitely say to bet this hand. Like, the overall strategy showed that we usually want to differentiate between checking and potting. So I would not really have a half potting sizing here, I think, because it's just such small frequency overall. And I would just opt to pot if I would end up betting with this hand.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a clear intuition on this. Like, for this to know, we also again would need to go back to the big blind then. So what is the big blind calling range? So then we can better assign, okay, like what is what are the important blockers? Like, if we don't know what out of position should call, we also don't know like what are good side cuts for us. So if out of position would never call jacks, for example, then I don't care pretty much if I have a check or not, or it might be a good card to bet. So yeah, I definitely think that a straight is always calling. Like, what are the hands that always check call? Most of the straights. I think GTO we saw that also the low flushes, I guess. Okay, we didn't take a look at this specific spots, but thinking about our defending frequency, definitely straight with flush blocker and flushes. And I don't know if we can go any lower, like jacks. I don't think so. Make it already.
Yeah.
So I guess 5, 7 should be the key cards, and then not having queen 10 and maybe ideally not having queen 9 as a side factor. So I have a 7 and I have queen 9, so maybe this might be even one of the weaker ones. I'm not sure though. You went for half pot?
No, I said I wouldn't go for half pot at all in this spot because
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
such low frequency.
yeah, true.
And there's still combos like, I mean, if we talk about big blind strategy, I think big blind, has a lot of check calls here with hands like king jack, no backup, pocket jacks, no backup, king 6, no backup, that he gets to this river with. Not sure. I mean, maybe there is some hero calling, especially if he holds the ace of hearts.
True. Yeah, that's a good
Or
point. Like, for
or
example, like in position, definitely will check kings, will check jacks behind, will check king jack behind.
Yeah,
So if out of position is blocking king jack, then they might have a good hero call.
with like the 10 of hearts or the ace of hearts.
So yeah, let's go for pot. And pot is correct here. So what we can do here now is experiment with different cards. I mean, it always should be in our range. Like, yeah, this is not in our range anymore. So this is where I would go from here, taking a look that spades also seems to be bad. Like if we had this hand with spades, this also wants us to check a little bit more. I guess it's just ups the frequency where out of position is having a slow played ace of hearts. But yeah, again, if you think that your opponent is always leading with the ace high flush, then you can just always pot all the queen high flushes. And yeah, that's the beauty of this game, right? Like figure out population tendencies, still knowing what's over, or trying to get to up to more levels of knowledge of what the solver does or likes to do, so that if you have a hand, you can think more and more deep about your side cards and then how this is gonna influence your game.
Yeah, very, very well put. And I think that's what also brings, the long-term satisfaction in studying and playing this game, to think deeply, to challenge yourself about these spots instead of, grinding a lot of hands and kind of playing on autopilot and always on level 0 or level 1 to make these decisions, but instead to go that level deeper, and yeah, you will definitely benefit from it.
Yeah, and this is, I think, a nice example to sum it up. Ace high flush is a good call because it's blocking king jack. It's blocking the checking back range, the value range that in position bet 2 streets.
Unblocking spades. Yeah.
Unblocking spades. And that's the next thing, though, honestly. Like, this is just only one spot now. Like, this is, okay, under the gun versus big blind. And this is exactly this board. And this is exactly against 2 barrels and facing the 3rd barrel. But what would change if out of position checked back the turn or checked back the flop and then bets the turn, bets the river? The ranges will always be a little bit different, right? So here, in position is very kings, jacks heavy. So this means that these low flushes also are quite good. And how often are kings and jacks in this range? How would it be if the board is ace, king 6 instead? Then in position has even more sets, and then therefore there's flushes, so the lower flushes get better. Just learn concept by concept. Don't get too deep, and always try to understand the why is pretty much the key. And always try to think one level deeper if possible.
Yeah, I think it was a great summary of this hand and of this session. And I don't think I will add anything to it, but I will want to thank you, Matthias, for organizing and leading this stream. I want to thank the audience for being part of it. And that was it from my side. Do you have anything else to say, Matthias?
Oh, it has been a long stream, but I think we have talked about a lot of the very important key aspects about the differences 4 card to 5 cards, and how to build up a learning and autonomously without with being able to dive deeper and deeper yourself, but thinking about more and more concepts. You can dive as deep and as shallow as you want. You can start out with some basics, as we mentioned, and then we can go deeper and deeper, as you just saw here at the end. Have fun studying, because I really like studying. I oftentimes, mostly throughout my career, I preferred studying over playing, which is, I think, quite rare. But if you liked this, then maybe you can understand a little bit why this is the case. And still, you should also play a decent amount, because this is where you gain your income.
Thank you so much.
Definitely have fun also with the course of Emty. And I think, the combination, of course, is the best that you can go for. And yeah, now you have the free, if you bought the course, you have your free Vision access as well. So yeah, play around with it. We gave you a rough overview about the features in Vision. There's always more to come. So yeah, also stay tuned. There is a Discord for the Vision. And yeah, thank you so much to you as well, Emty. It has been a pleasure. And yeah, the time flew by.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah,
Yeah. So
it was a
that was
pleasure.
great. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So thank you and have a good evening, afternoon, night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.